The room is still, bathed in the soft, gray light of a world that has not yet decided to be day or night. Perhaps the only sound is the low, distant hum of the city, a machine breathing in its sleep, but inside, a storm rages. Inside the mind, there are no quiet corners. There is the ghost vibration of a phone in a pocket, a phantom notification promising connection but delivering only distraction. There is the endless scroll of a to-do list, each item a small weight, accumulating into an unbearable burden. There is the sharp echo of a conversation from yesterday, replayed and re-examined, and the vague, heavy fog of a meeting scheduled for tomorrow, already being worried about, pre-lived in anxiety. This is a prison, not of steel and stone, but of thoughts and fears. It is a fortress we build for ourselves, brick by painful brick, and then forget we are both the prisoner and the guard. This condition, this low-grade hum of dissatisfaction and a quiet, constant panic, has become the background music of modern life. We are told that we live in an age of limitless possibility, of endless connection, yet we often feel profoundly limited and deeply alone. We are sold a dream of happiness that is always just one more purchase, one more promotion, one more achievement away. So we run on a treadmill of wanting, believing that peace is a destination we will finally reach if we just run fast enough. But the horizon moves with us. The more we add to our lives, the heavier they seem to become, cluttered with possessions, obligations, and the digital ghosts of 1,000 unfulfilling interactions. This feeling of being overwhelmed, of being lost, is not a personal failure. It is a natural response to a world that constantly demands we look outward for our sense of self, for our validation, for our peace. But what if there is another way? What if the path to peace does not lie in adding more, but in gently taking away? What if the solution to the mind's relentless noise is not to shout over it, but to learn to listen to its silence? There is an ancient path, a wisdom tested not for decades, but for millennia, that offers a different promise. It suggests that peace is not a place to get to, but a state to return to. It provides a map, not to a new land, but to the territory of our own mind. This wisdom, born from the deep introspection of the Buddha, teaches a radical and beautiful idea. It teaches that we do not need to fight our minds. We only need to understand them. The journey is not one of battle, but of befriending. And its central instruction is simple, yet profound. It is a path of release, a process of untying the knots within. It is the art of letting the mind settle, so that the peace which was always there can finally arise. We begin our journey by listening, not to the world outside, but to the world within. For many of us, if we were to sit in perfect, external silence, we would discover a startling paradox. The silence would be deafening. It would be filled with a kind of noise that has no sound, a relentless, churning activity that lives behind our eyes. This is the unseen noise, the constant hum of a mind that has forgotten how to be still. It is the architect of modern anxiety, a feeling so pervasive, so common, that we have accepted it as a non-negotiable part of being alive. We feel it as a tightness in the chest, a knot in the stomach, a vague sense of impending doom that shadows even our most joyful moments. We might be sitting on a comfortable sofa, in a safe home, with our basic needs met, and yet we are not at peace. We are at war, engaged in a silent, internal battle against a ceaseless barrage of thoughts, worries, and plans. To find our way out of this prison, we must first understand its walls, and to do that, we must make a crucial distinction, the distinction between the world as it is and the story our mind tells us about it. This is the difference between pressure and stress. Pressure is an external force. It is a fact of the world. A deadline at work is pressure. A traffic jam, when you are already late, is pressure. An unexpected bill in the mail, a crying baby in the night, a difficult conversation you must have. These are all forms of pressure. In and of themselves, they are neutral. They are simply conditions, events unfolding in the fabric of reality. They exist outside of you. Stress, however, is something else entirely. Stress is the internal reaction. It is the story you weave around the fact of the pressure. The deadline is the pressure, but the frantic, heart-pounding thought, I will never finish this. I will fail. My boss will be furious. I might lose my job. That is stress. The traffic jam is the pressure, but the escalating anger, the clenching of the jaw, the relentless monologue about how unfair it is, how your whole day is ruined, that is stress. Stress is the layer of narrative, of judgment, of fear and catastrophizing that we add on top of reality. It is a product of the mind, and the modern world, with its relentless connectivity and information overload, has become a masterful pressure cooker. Our phones buzz, our inboxes overflow, the news cycle screams, and social media presents a curated illusion of perfect lives that we feel we must compete with. The external pressures have multiplied exponentially, giving our minds an almost infinite number of opportunities to generate stress. We have become so accustomed to adding this layer of stressful narrative that we no longer see it as a choice. We believe the traffic jam is the anger. We believe the deadline is the panic. We have forgotten that there is a space between the event and our reaction to it. And in that space lies the potential for our freedom. To understand why our minds are so adept at creating this stress, we can look to a powerful metaphor from Buddhist psychology, the concept of the monkey mind. The Buddha described the state of the untrained mind as being like a monkey, swinging frantically and without rest from branch to branch in a forest. But not just any monkey. Imagine a monkey that is drunk, that has been stung by a scorpion, and is possessed by a demon. This vivid, almost comical image perfectly captures the chaotic, agitated, and painful nature of our own thought processes. The mind swings from a branch in the past to a branch in the future, rarely ever resting on the branch of the present moment. One moment, it is in the past, replaying a mistake, feeling the sting of an old wound, chewing on the bitter cud of regret. I should have said this. Why did I do that? If only things had been different. The next moment, it swings into the future, rehearsing for a disaster that will likely never happen, building elaborate fantasies, or simply drowning in a long list of worries. What if I get sick? Will I have enough money? What will they think of me? This incessant swinging is utterly exhausting. It is the reason you can have a day of complete physical rest, sitting on a chair and doing nothing, and yet feel utterly depleted by the end of it. Your body may have been still, but your mind has been running a frantic, disorganized marathon through the jungles of time. It is a motor that never turns off, constantly burning our precious mental and emotional fuel, leaving us feeling drained, unfocused, and perpetually on edge. The monkey mind is not our enemy. It is simply our mind in its untrained state. It is a wild horse, powerful and full of energy, but without a rider to guide it, it runs wild, often in directions that cause it and us great harm. This internal chaos is further amplified by a strange cultural phenomenon, the cult of busyness. In our society, busyness has become a status symbol, a badge of honor. When someone asks, "How are you?" the most common, almost proud response is, "Busy, so busy." We have come to equate being busy with being important, with being productive, with leading a life of value. To be not busy can feel like a confession of failure, of being unimportant or lazy. But we must pause and ask, what is this busyness really about? Is it truly productive action, or is it often just frantic motion? Are we moving toward a clear and meaningful goal, or are we just spinning our wheels to create the illusion of progress? Very often, this cult of busyness is a sophisticated form of avoidance. It is a defense mechanism. When we fill every single moment with activity, with work, with social engagements, with digital distractions, we cleverly avoid having to be alone with ourselves. The noise of constant doing drowns out the quiet, and sometimes uncomfortable, whispers of our own heart. If we are always in motion, we do not have to confront our loneliness, our dissatisfaction, our deep questions about meaning and purpose. Busyness becomes a shield, protecting us from the vulnerability of introspection, and this creates a vicious cycle. We feel an underlying anxiety, a sense of unease. To escape it, we throw ourselves into activity, but the frenetic, scattered energy of that activity only fuels more anxiety, tightens the knot in our stomach, and reinforces the need for even more distraction. We are running from the very thing our running is creating. There is an old story of a man who was desperate to find perfect silence. He was convinced that the noise of the world was the source of all his troubles. He left his bustling city, traveled for months, and finally found a cave high in the Himalayan mountains, a place so remote that the only sounds were the wind and the call of an eagle. He settled into the cave, closed his eyes, and prepared to experience a peace he had only dreamed of. But what he found was astonishing. The noise was louder than ever before. It was a deafening cacophony of his own thoughts. He heard his worries about his family back home, his regrets about business deals gone wrong, his plans for what he would do when he returned. He heard his own internal voice judging, criticizing, and complaining, louder and more clearly than ever before. In that profound solitude, he came to a powerful realization. The source of the noise was not in the world. It was in him. He had carried it with him all the way to the top of the mountain. He had been searching for an external solution to an internal problem. This is the core of our investigation. The unseen noise, this modern anxiety, is not something being done to us. It is something being generated by us. It is the byproduct of a mind that is constantly reacting, constantly swinging, constantly judging, and constantly running away from itself. We have been conditioned to believe that peace is the absence of external problems, but true peace is the presence of internal stillness, even when external problems exist. The first and most courageous step on this journey is to stop looking outside for the source of the noise. It is to turn our attention inward with honesty and with kindness, and to simply acknowledge the storm that is there, to name it, to see it for what it is, a collection of thoughts, a series of reactions, a pattern of behavior. By seeing it clearly, without judgment, we take away its power. We begin the process of moving from being the prisoner of our mind to becoming its gentle and wise caretaker. Now that we have identified this noise, this constant hum of dissatisfaction, we must ask an even deeper question. What is its fundamental nature? What is this pervasive feeling of not quite rightness that seems to lie beneath everything we experience? To answer this, we must go to the very heart of the Buddha's first teaching, to the truth of what he called dukkha. Having identified the unseen noise within, the relentless activity of the untrained mind, we can now give it a name. In the language of the Buddha, this fundamental state of unease, this pervasive sense of things being somehow off-center, is called dukkha. This single Pali word is the cornerstone of the entire Buddhist path, and it is the subject of the first noble truth. Yet, it is also one of the most profoundly misunderstood concepts in all of Eastern philosophy. It is often translated simply as suffering, and this translation has led many in the West to perceive Buddhism as a pessimistic, life-denying, or morbid tradition. It can sound as if the first premise is that life is nothing but misery, but this is a significant misunderstanding of the original intent. To understand the first noble truth is not to adopt a bleak outlook. It is to engage in an act of profound realism and courage. Imagine you go to a wise and compassionate doctor because you have been feeling unwell for a long time. A poor doctor might dismiss your concerns and say, "Oh, just think positive thoughts." But a truly great doctor will look carefully, run tests, and then sit down with you and say, "Here is the issue. This is the nature of your illness." This diagnosis is not an act of pessimism. It is an act of empowerment. It is the absolutely essential first step toward a cure. Without an accurate diagnosis, any treatment is just guesswork. The Buddha's first teaching, the truth of dukkha, is exactly this: a clear, precise, and compassionate diagnosis of the human condition. The word dukkha is richer than suffering. It also implies unsatisfactoriness, stress, anxiety, and a fundamental instability. Think of a beautifully crafted wooden wheel that has a single flaw in its axle. It can still turn, it can still travel for many miles, but with every single rotation, there will be a slight bump, a subtle vibration, a feeling that it is not turning perfectly. That subtle, persistent bump is dukkha. To heal ourselves, we must first have the courage to acknowledge the bump. The Buddha identified three distinct, yet interwoven types of this experience. The first and most obvious type is what is called dukkha, which can be translated as the suffering of suffering, or the pain of pain. This is the dukkha that we all know intimately and need no convincing of its existence. It is the raw, undeniable pain of life. It is the physical pain of a headache, of a broken bone, of a chronic illness. It is the pain of our bodies aging, growing weaker, becoming susceptible to disease, and ultimately facing death. No amount of wealth, power, or positive thinking can grant us complete immunity from this reality. As long as we have a human body, we are subject to its frailties. This category also includes our emotional and psychological pain. It is the sharp sting of grief when we lose someone we love. It is the ache of loneliness, the bitterness of betrayal, the humiliation of being rejected or criticized. It is the heartbreak that can feel like a physical wound in our chest. This is the straightforward, overt suffering that life presents to us. Many spiritual and self-help paths try to teach us to ignore this pain, to bypass it, to cover it with a veneer of forced positivity. The Buddhist path does the opposite. It asks us to turn toward this pain, to acknowledge it without flinching, to admit, yes, this hurts. This is not about wallowing in misery. It is about being honest. This honesty is the foundation of true compassion, both for ourselves and for others, because it connects us to a universal aspect of the sentient experience. Everyone, without exception, feels the pain of pain. Here, we can learn from one of the most practical and insightful parables in Buddhism, the story of the second arrow. The teaching says that in life, we cannot always avoid the first arrow. A first arrow might be a sudden illness, the loss of a job, or the end of a relationship. It is an unfortunate, painful event that comes from outside of us. It strikes and it hurts. This is the unavoidable dukkha. However, what most of us do immediately after being struck by the first arrow is that we shoot a second arrow into ourselves. The second arrow is our reaction to the first. It is the storm of thoughts like, why me? This is terrible. I can't bear it. My life is ruined. It is the anger, the self-pity, the fear, and the despair that we layer on top of the initial pain. The wound from the first arrow is painful enough, but the wound from the second arrow is often far deeper and lasts much longer. A wise person, the teaching explains, still feels the pain of the first arrow. They do not deny it, but they have trained their mind not to fire the second arrow. They don't add a layer of mental anguish to the physical or emotional pain that is already present. They experience the pressure of life, but they do not generate the extra, optional, self-inflicted stress. This teaching reveals that while we are not always in control of what happens to us, we have a profound capacity to choose how we respond. Much of what we call suffering is not the first arrow of reality, but the second, third, and fourth arrows of our own reactive minds. The second type of dukkha is more subtle and in many ways more profound. It is called viparinama dukkha, the suffering of change. This is the suffering that is woven into our happiest moments. It is the anxiety that arises from the fact that all pleasant experiences are impermanent. We finally get the job we always wanted, and for a while, there is joy. But this joy is soon accompanied by the subtle fear of losing the job, or the pressure to perform well, or the realization that it isn't as perfect as we imagined. We are on a beautiful vacation, watching a perfect sunset, and a thought arises. In 2 days, I have to go back to work. The pleasure of the present moment becomes tainted by the sorrow of its inevitable end. We eat a delicious meal, and the pleasure disappears as soon as the plate is empty. We fall in love, and the intoxicating joy is shadowed by the deep-seated fear that this person might leave us, or that the relationship might change. This is the suffering of clinging. Because we do not fully accept the flowing, transient nature of reality, we try to grasp onto pleasant moments, to freeze them, to make them permanent. We are like a child at the beach, trying to hold a wave in our hands. The nature of the wave is to crest and fall, and our struggle against this nature is the very source of our frustration. This type of dukkha reveals the flaw in the materialistic, pleasure-seeking dream. Even if we could somehow manage to experience only pleasant things for the rest of our lives, we would still suffer, because we would live in constant fear of that pleasure ending. Peace, therefore, cannot be found by accumulating more pleasant experiences, but by changing our relationship to them. The third, and most subtle and pervasive type of dukkha is sankhara dukkha, the suffering of conditioned existence itself. This is the background hum of anxiety, the baseline unsatisfactoriness that we spoke of earlier. It is the dukkha that is inherent in the very nature of being a self in the world. What does this mean? It means that our existence is conditioned. We, and everything we perceive are a temporary assembly of countless shifting parts and causes. Our bodies are composed of non-body elements, the food we eat, the air we breathe. Our minds are a flow of thoughts, feelings, and perceptions, all dependent on previous conditions. There is no solid, separate, permanent me at the center of it all. There is only a process, a constant state of flux. Sankhara dukkha is the stress inherent in this instability. It is the deep existential vulnerability of being a temporary phenomenon in an ever-changing universe. It is the feeling of not being fully in control, the anxiety of being subject to birth, aging, sickness, and death. It is the subtle feeling that something is fundamentally fragile and unreliable about our experience. It is the bump in the axle of the wheel. It is present even when we are not in obvious pain, dukkha, and not clinging to a pleasant experience that is ending, viparinama dukkha. It is the quiet hum of insecurity that drives us to seek security in things that can never be truly secure, like money, status, or relationships. It is the deepest layer of the unseen noise. To look at these three forms of dukkha is not to become morose. It is to become a realist. It is to finally stop demanding that life be something other than what it is. It is to stop fighting a war against reality that we can never win. The acknowledgement, there is dukkha, is one of the most liberating statements one can make. It is the end of denial. It is the end of the exhausting pretense that everything is, or should be, perfect. It is the moment the patient accepts the doctor's diagnosis and becomes ready to listen to the next instruction. It is an act of profound self-compassion, an admission that it is difficult to be a human being, and that our feelings of stress and dissatisfaction are not a sign that we are broken, but a sign that we are awake to the true nature of our situation. To look at dukkha squarely, without flinching, is the beginning of wisdom. And once we have acknowledged the diagnosis, the logical next question a wise patient asks the doctor is this: what is causing this illness? Where does it come from? This inquiry leads us directly to the second noble truth, to the investigation of the origin of dukkha, a force known as Tanha, the deep-seated craving and clinging of the mind. Having had the courage to look directly at the diagnosis of dukkha, the pervasive unsatisfactoriness of our existence, we naturally arrive at the physician's next crucial question: what is its cause? A diagnosis without an understanding of the cause offers no path to a cure. The second noble truth addresses this question directly, and its conclusion is both simple and profoundly challenging. It states that the origin of dukkha is tanha. This Pali word is most often translated as craving or desire, but its meaning is closer to the visceral, life or death feeling of thirst. It is not a gentle wanting. It is a deep, parched, desperate thirst for something to quench a fire within. The Buddha identified this relentless thirst as the engine that drives the wheel of suffering, the unseen force that keeps the monkey mind swinging, and the unseen noise humming. It is essential to approach this teaching not as a moral judgment, but as a psychological insight. The point is not that desire is bad or that you are a greedy person. The point is that this mechanism of thirst, a mechanism that was essential for our physical survival in a world of scarcity, has become the very source of our psychological distress in a world of abundance. It is an ancient survival software running on modern hardware, and the mismatch is creating a system-wide crash. To understand this engine of dukkha, we must examine its three primary forms. The first and most easily recognizable form is kama tanha, the thirst for sense pleasures. This is the craving for agreeable experiences through our six senses. The thirst for beautiful sights, pleasant sounds, fragrant smells, delicious tastes, comfortable physical sensations, and even agreeable thoughts or ideas. In our modern world, this form of tanha has been elevated to the status of a primary life goal. It is the engine of consumerism. It is the craving that is targeted by every advertisement, every social media feed, every entertainment platform. It is the desperate thirst for the next dopamine hit. It is the itch that makes you check your phone for a new notification, the compulsion to watch one more episode, the longing for that perfect cup of coffee, the belief that a new car, a new phone, or a new item of clothing will finally bring lasting satisfaction. The mechanism of kama tanha operates in a predictable and ultimately frustrating loop. First, we experience a pleasant sensation. The mind immediately grasps onto it, creating a thought, "This is good, I like this, I want more of this." This wanting propels us to seek out and repeat the experience. But herein lies the trap, the law of diminishing returns, or what psychologists call hedonic adaptation. The first bite of a chocolate cake is divine. The second is very good. By the 10th, the pleasure has faded significantly, perhaps even turning into discomfort. The thrill of a new purchase is potent at first, but it quickly fades as the object becomes a familiar part of our landscape. The mind, now bored with the old stimulus, immediately begins its restless search for a new source of pleasure, a new thirst to quench. This is the hedonic treadmill. We are running, faster and faster, seeking out new and more intense pleasures, only to find that our baseline level of happiness remains stubbornly the same. We are constantly chasing a high that is, by its very nature, temporary. This endless, unquenchable thirst is powerfully illustrated in Buddhist cosmology by the figure of the Preta, or the hungry ghost. These beings are depicted with enormous, distended bellies, representing their limitless, all-consuming desire. Yet, they have mouths as small as the eye of a needle, and thin, constricted throats, sometimes described as being on fire. This vivid imagery is a perfect metaphor for the state of kamatana. The world may lay a feast of sensory pleasures before use an abundance of food, entertainment, and material goods, but our internal state of craving, our tiny, constricted throat, prevents us from ever feeling truly nourished or satisfied. Even when we manage to get a drop of what we desire, it only seems to inflame our thirst further, causing more pain and frustration. We live in a world of unprecedented material abundance, yet we suffer from unprecedented levels of anxiety and dissatisfaction. We are a society of hungry ghosts, gorging on experiences but never feeling full, because the problem is not in the supply of pleasure, but in the very nature of our thirst. We are looking for lasting fulfillment in things that are, by their nature, fleeting and unable to satisfy the deep longing of the heart. The second form of thirst is more subtle, more tied to our ego and our sense of self. It is bhava tanha, the thirst to be, or the craving to become. This is not just a craving for a specific experience, but a craving for existence itself, for a particular identity, for a solid and lasting place in the world. It is the deep drive to become someone. It is the ambition that whispers, "I will finally be happy and at peace when I become a CEO, when I become a homeowner, when I become a published author, when I am respected and admired by all." It is the thirst that drives our relentless pursuit of self-improvement, not for the simple joy of learning, but with the underlying belief that our current self is inadequate and a future, better self will finally be worthy of peace. This craving can even manifest in spiritual pursuits. One can develop a craving to become an enlightened master, to become a great meditator, to become someone who is free from all desire. But this is still a form of thirst, a subtle trap of the ego, because it is rooted in a fundamental dissatisfaction with the present moment and who we are, right here, right now. Bhavatanya is the force that builds and defends our identity. It fuels our need to be right, our attachment to our opinions, our desire to leave a legacy. It is the deep fear of insignificance. And because it is based on establishing a solid, permanent identity in a world that is fundamentally impermanent, it is a guaranteed recipe for dukkha. It creates enormous pressure, a constant need to perform, to maintain our image, and a deep anxiety that this self we have so carefully constructed might one day crumble. The third form of thirst is the dark twin of the second. It is vibhavatana, the thirst for non-existence, the craving for annihilation. If bhavatana is the desperate desire to be someone, vibhavatana is the desperate desire to be no one. In its most extreme form, this manifests as suicidal ideation, the overwhelming wish for the pain of existence to simply stop. But it appears in our lives in many more subtle ways. It is the anger that wishes to annihilate its object. It is the despair that wants to crawl into a hole and disappear. It is the craving that drives addiction, the thirst to numb ourselves, to drink or drug ourselves into a state of temporary oblivion to escape a painful feeling or a difficult reality. It is the person who spends hours mindlessly scrolling through social media, not for pleasure, but to simply make time and consciousness disappear. It is any action motivated by the desperate wish. I don't want to feel this anymore. This craving for non-being is a direct reaction to the pain of dukkha, but because it is still a form of intense, reactive thirst, it only binds us more tightly to the wheel of suffering. It is an attempt to solve the problem of suffering by destroying the one who suffers, rather than by understanding and uprooting the cause of the suffering itself. These three forms of Tanha, the thirst for pleasure, the thirst to become, and the thirst to not bear the secret engine humming beneath the surface of our lives, powering the unseen noise. They are the roots of the tree of dukkha. They keep us perpetually leaning into the future, searching for the next pleasure, the next identity, or the next escape, ensuring we are never fully present, never truly at home in our own lives. To see this mechanism at work within ourselves, without judgment, is a revolutionary act. It is to move from being a passive victim of our desires to becoming a curious scientist of our own mind. It is to realize that this thirst is not a personal moral failing, but an impersonal process, a deeply conditioned habit. And the moment we see it as a habit, we can begin to cultivate new ones. But this raises a fundamental question. This great thirst seems to be in service of something. What is it that fuels this thirst? What is this self that is so desperate to be satisfied, to become something, or to cease to be? To truly understand the root of craving, we must look at the very foundation upon which it is built, the idea of a solid, separate, and permanent self. This inquiry takes us to the deepest and most liberating of the Buddha's teachings, the truth of Anatta, or no self. We have followed the physician's diagnosis. We have seen the illness, dukkha, the pervasive unsatisfactoriness of life. We have identified its cause, Tanha, the relentless thirst for pleasure, for being, and for non-being. But this diagnosis forces us to ask a question that strikes at the very heart of our identity. What is it that fuels this dukkha? Who is it that is afflicted by this thirst? For our entire lives, we have operated on a fundamental, unexamined assumption. The assumption is that inside each of us, there is a central command center, a permanent and solid me. This self is the thinker of our thoughts, the feeler of our feelings, the author of our actions, and the protagonist in the long movie of our life. It is the CEO in the high-rise office of our mind. We work so hard to protect this self, to promote it, to satisfy its desires. It is the foundation upon which our entire psychological world is built. And it is this very foundation that the Buddha's most profound teaching asks us to gently and carefully examine. This teaching is Anatta, or no self. Let us be very clear from the outset. The teaching of Anatta is not a nihilistic declaration that you do not exist. It is not saying that nothing matters. In fact, it is the very opposite. It is a path to discovering who you truly are by first letting go of who you think you are. It suggests that our common idea of a fixed, separate, and unchanging self is an illusion, a mental construction. And it is the clinging to this illusion, the desperate defense of this fictional entity, that is the deepest root of our fear and suffering. To understand this, let us turn to a classic story from the Buddhist texts, a conversation between the great sage Nagasena and the Greek king Melinda. The king, a sharp and inquisitive man, asked the sage, "What is your name?" The sage replied, "I am known as Nagasena, but this is just a designation, a name in common use. For in the absolute sense, no permanent person can be found here." The king was astonished. He argued, "If there is no person, then who is it that wears these robes? Who eats, sleeps, and speaks?" To illustrate his point, Nagasena turned the question back on the king. "Your Majesty, how did you arrive here? Did you walk, or did you come in a chariot?" The king replied that he had come in a chariot. "Excellent," said Nagasena. "Then please, define for me what a chariot is. Is it the wheels?" "No," said the king. "Is it the axle, the frame, the reins, the yoke?" To each question, the king had to answer, "Number." Nagasena then concluded, "Then chariot is simply a convenient name, a label we give to this collection of parts, properly assembled and working together. It has no independent, essential existence apart from its components." The king was delighted by this wisdom. Nagasena then explained, "Just so, Your Majesty. What we call Nagasena, or the self, is simply a conventional name for a collection of physical and mental components. If we look closely, we will not find a separate, unchanging owner of these parts. There is only the process, the functioning, the dynamic interplay of a set of aggregates. This is the great deconstruction project of Buddhist psychology. It asks us to look at our own experience and see if we can find this supposed CEO. The Buddha analyzed our entire subjective experience and broke it down into 5 categories, known as the 5 aggregates, or skandhas. These are the parts of the chariot. The first aggregate is rupa, or form. This is our physical body, composed of flesh, bone, and blood. It is also the entire material world we perceive through our senses. We tend to identify strongly with our bodies. But is the body a permanent self? It is constantly changing. Cells die and are replaced. It ages, gets sick, and will one day perish. If you lose a limb, are you any less you? Clearly, the body is a process, not a static thing. It is something we have, not something we are. The second aggregate is vedana, or feeling. This is the raw data of our sensory experience, which is immediately tagged as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. A cool breeze is pleasant. A loud, sudden noise is unpleasant. The feeling of our clothes against our skin is often neutral. These feelings arise, exist for a moment, and then vanish, replaced by the next one. They are like bubbles on the surface of a pond, constantly appearing and disappearing. Can this fleeting, unreliable stream of feelings be our true permanent self? Impossible. The third aggregate is sana, or perception. This is the mental faculty that recognizes, identifies, and labels our experience. It sees a shape and a color and says, that is a blue car. It hears a tone of voice and says, that is anger. It feels a sensation and says, that is sadness. This process is essential for navigating the world, but it is also a conditioned process, dependent on our memory and past experiences. It is a function, a mental event, not a solid entity. The fourth aggregate is the most complex. It is sankhara, which can be translated as mental formations, volitions, or habitual tendencies. This includes all of our thoughts, opinions, biases, prejudices, intentions, and impulses. It is the chattering of the monkey mind, the voice that plans, worries, judges, and desires. It is the driving force of our actions, the root of what we will later explore as karma. When we say I think, we assume there is an I doing the thinking. But if we look closely, we see that thoughts simply arise in the mind, often unbidden. These mental formations are the most dynamic and changeable of all the aggregates. Our opinions change, our habits can be broken, our moods shift like the weather. To identify with this chaotic torrent as our true self is to build our house on a raging river. Finally, the fifth aggregate is vijnana, or consciousness. This is the fundamental quality of awareness, the knowing faculty that allows the other aggregates to be experienced. There is a consciousness of seeing, a consciousness of hearing, a consciousness of thinking, and so on. We might think, aha, this awareness must be the real me, the observer. But the Buddha explained that even consciousness is not a single, continuous entity. It arises in dependence on conditions. Seeing consciousness arises when an I, a form, and light come together. It is not a permanent soul that looks out from behind our eyes. It is a flickering light, a series of discrete moments of knowing that arise and pass away with each instant of experience. When we investigate our experience in this way, looking for a permanent, separate self in any of these 5 aggregates, we come up empty-handed. We find only a dynamic, interconnected, and impermanent process. So, what is the self? The self is a story. It is a narrative that the mind constructs, moment by moment, by stringing together these fleeting processes and identifying with them. It is a grammatical convenience that has become a psychological prison. The discovery of Anatta is not a cause for despair. It is the key to liberation. This is why, when you believe in a solid, separate self, you live in constant fear. You fear criticism because it threatens the ego. You fear failure because it diminishes the ego. You fear sickness and death because they promise the annihilation of the ego. But if you see that this self is a fabrication, a process, what is there to be threatened? What is there to defend? The wind cannot tear a hole in empty space. Furthermore, the ego is a heavy burden. The constant effort of self-promotion, of defending our opinions, of managing our reputation, of worrying about what others think, this is utterly exhausting. It is the source of so much of our anxiety. Realizing Anatta is like putting down a heavy bag that you didn't even know you were carrying. It is a profound release, a homecoming to a state of ease and simplicity. We can finally relax. We don't have to be somebody. We can simply be. This insight also becomes the foundation for limitless compassion. When we see that our own being is an impersonal process, we can see others in the same light. The person who insults us is not a solid, malicious other. They are a flowing process of aggregates, driven by their own conditioned habits and suffering. This understanding dissolves anger and resentment, replacing it with a sense of shared experience and empathy. The self, then, is not a noun, but a verb. It is not a static object, but a dynamic, flowing process of thinking, feeling, sensing, and being aware. To realize this is not to lose yourself. It is to lose the chains of a small, fearful, and fabricated identity, and to discover a much vaster, more interconnected, and liberating way of being. It is to go from being a brittle statue, terrified of cracking, to becoming a flowing river, able to embrace and move with all of life's changes. But this radical truth immediately raises a critical question. If there is no permanent self, no enduring pilot in the cockpit, then what accounts for moral responsibility? If it's all just an impersonal process, why should I be good? What is it that carries the consequence of an action from one moment to the next, or even from one life to the next? This essential question leads us directly to the next part of our journey, the exploration of the subtle, impersonal, and profound natural law of karma. The teaching of Anatta, or no self, while profoundly liberating, leaves us standing before a critical and logical question. If there is no fixed, continuous self, no permanent pilot in the cockpit, then who is responsible for our actions? Who is it that reaps the rewards of kindness or suffers the consequences of cruelty? If the me of this moment is not the same as the me of the next moment, how can there be any moral coherence to our lives? It is here that the Buddha presents his teaching on karma, and in doing so, reveals a vision of the universe that is not only selfless but also profoundly ethical and just. Just as with the term dukkha, the word karma has been widely misunderstood in the West. It has been co-opted to mean something akin to fate, destiny, or a system of cosmic revenge administered by an unseen judge. We hear people say, "He had it coming, that's karma," as if it were a punishment for a past misdeed. This fatalistic and punitive interpretation is entirely contrary to the Buddha's teaching. Karma is not a system of reward and punishment. Karma is a natural law, as impersonal and as reliable as the law of gravity. It is the law of cause and effect as it applies to intentional action. It is a teaching not of fatalism, but of radical freedom and responsibility. The absolute heart of the teaching on karma lies in a single crucial word, Tanha, which means intention, volition, or will. The Buddha stated this unequivocally. It is intention, monks, that I call karma. For having intended, one acts by body, speech, and mind. This shifts the entire focus of morality from the external outcome of an action to the internal state of mind from which the action originates. The world is complex and unpredictable. The results of our actions are often beyond our control. You can act with the purest of motives and have it lead to an unfortunate outcome. Conversely, you can act with a malicious heart, and through sheer luck, no harm may come of it. The law of karma is not concerned with these external results. It is concerned with the quality of the intention that set the action in motion. Let us imagine a surgeon performing a complex operation with the sole intention of saving a life. Despite her skill and focus, the patient dies on the table. Now imagine a thief who breaks into a house and, in a fit of rage, stabs the homeowner with the clear intention to kill. Yet the victim, through a miracle of medicine, survives. From a legalistic standpoint, the outcomes are opposite. But from a karmic standpoint, the surgeon's action was wholesome or skillful because it was born from an intention of compassion. The thief's action was unwholesome or unskillful, because it was born from an intention of hatred and greed. Karma is the quality of the seed we plant, not the weather that affects its growth. These intentional actions, or karmic seeds, are planted through three doors: the door of the body, the door of speech, and the door of the mind. Actions of the body are the most obvious: an act of generosity, an act of violence. Actions of speech are equally potent: words that heal and unite, or words that slander and divide. But most fundamentally, karma is rooted in the mind. An unwholesome thought of greed, a flicker of intense ill will, or a moment of stubborn delusion is, in itself, a complete karmic action. It is the planting of a seed in the soil of our own consciousness, a seed that will, under the right conditions, eventually bear its corresponding fruit. This fruit, the result of karma, is called vipaka. It is crucial to distinguish between karma, the intentional action or the seed, and vipaka, the result or the fruit. They are not the same, and there is often a time delay between the two. This process is beautifully illustrated by the parable of the farmer. A wise farmer understands that the quality of his harvest depends entirely on the quality of the seeds he chooses to sow. His mind is the field, the soil. His intention is the act of choosing the seed. He can choose to plant seeds of corn and wheat, seeds of kindness, generosity, patience, and wisdom. Or he can choose to plant seeds of poisonous nightshade, seeds of greed, hatred, ignorance, and jealousy. Once the seed is planted, the law of nature takes over. The farmer cannot stand over the seed and command it to sprout tomorrow. The growth is a natural, gradual process. Similarly, the results of our karmic actions do not always manifest immediately. An act of kindness may not be rewarded right away. An act of cruelty may not be punished instantly, but the seed has been sown, and the energetic potential is there. Inevitably, when the conditions are right, the right amount of sun, water, and time, the seed will bear its fruit. The farmer who planted corn will reap a harvest of corn. The farmer who planted nightshade will find his field full of poison. The earth does not punish the farmer for planting poison. It simply returns the natural, impersonal result of his action. The law of karma operates with this same impersonal neutrality. It is the universe's tendency to maintain equilibrium. Skillful actions, born of love and wisdom, naturally lead to peace and happiness. Unskillful actions, born of greed and hatred, naturally lead to pain and conflict. But how does this fit with Anatta, no self? If the farmer who plants the seed is not the exact same farmer who reaps the harvest months later, since all his cells have changed, how can we say he is responsible? The Buddhist explanation for this is the concept of the mind stream, or Siddha Santana. Imagine a river. The water flowing past you right now is not the same water that flowed past a moment ago, yet we call it the same river. It is a continuous flow, a sequence of causally connected moments. The river's present course and condition are a direct result of its past course. Or, imagine lighting one candle from the flame of another. The flame on the second candle is not the same flame as the first, but it is not entirely different either. Its existence is directly and causally dependent on the first flame. So it is with consciousness. There is no permanent soul that transmigrates, but there is a continuous stream of moments of consciousness, each moment conditioning the next. The person who performs a karmic action is a particular configuration of the five aggregates. This action, this intentional energy, becomes a cause that conditions the future flow of that mind stream. The person who experiences the result, the vipaka, is a later configuration of the five aggregates in that same stream. They are not the same entity, but they are not a completely different one either. They are the direct causal heir. In this way, the teachings of karma and anatta are not contradictory. They are two sides of the same coin, describing a universe that is both selfless and morally coherent. This understanding is profoundly empowering. It liberates us from two debilitating extremes: the extreme of blaming others or fate for our unhappiness, and the extreme of being crushed by guilt. The teaching invites us to see ourselves as both heirs and creators. We are the heirs of our past karma. The circumstances of our birth, our innate temperaments, our particular life challenges these are the fruits of seeds planted in the distant past. To understand this is to cultivate a deep acceptance of our present situation. Instead of crying out, Why me? We can learn to see our difficulties as the ripening of old karma, an opportunity to practice patience and wisdom. This is not resignation. It is the skillful acceptance of reality. More importantly, we are, in every single moment, the absolute creators of our future. The past is gone, but the present moment is an open field, a seedbed of infinite possibility. With every intention we form, with every word we speak, with every action we take, we are planting the seeds that will determine the quality of our future moments. The power to change our lives does not lie in some external force. It lies squarely within our own hearts and minds, right now. The practice, then, becomes one of purifying our intention. It becomes a moment-to-moment mindfulness of our own motivations. Before we speak, we can pause and ask, is this coming from a place of kindness or cruelty? Before we act, we can ask, is this motivated by generosity or by greed? As we go about our day, we can learn to recognize the feeling tone of skillful intentions. They feel light, open, and peaceful. And the feeling tone of unskillful intentions, they feel tight, contracted, and agitated. Now, the picture of the Buddhist path is becoming clearer and more complete. We have looked squarely at the diagnosis of our condition, the deep and subtle unsatisfactoriness of dukkha. We have identified its primary cause, the insatiable thirst of Tanha. We have investigated the true nature of the patient, realizing the fluid, process nature of our being through the lens of Anatta. And now, with karma, we have grasped the fundamental law of healing, the law of intentional cause and effect. The physician has laid all the groundwork. He has shown us the illness, the cause, the nature of our constitution, and the laws of causality that govern it. What then is the complete prescription? What is the comprehensive framework that puts all these pieces together and gives us a clear, step-by-step path to walk, a medicine to take to cure ourselves? This brings us to the very heart of the Buddha's teaching as a practical guide, the framework of the Four Noble Truths as a whole, and the specific medicine of the Noble Eightfold Path. We have been on a deep diagnostic journey. We have listened to the unseen noise within, the hum of modern anxiety. We have named the pervasive illness of our condition, the subtle and profound unsatisfactoriness of dukkha. We have identified its infectious agent, the burning thirst of Tanha. We have examined the nature of the patient, realizing the fluid, selfless reality of Anatta. And we have come to understand the natural law of cause and effect that governs our well-being, the law of karma. We have, in essence, laid out all the individual findings of a thorough medical examination. Now, we arrive at the pivotal moment where the great physician, the Buddha, synthesizes all of this information into a single, elegant, and profoundly practical framework. This framework was the very first teaching he gave after his enlightenment, and it forms the unshakable foundation of his entire path. It is the Four Noble Truths. It is vital to understand that these are not truths in the sense of dogmas that one must accept on blind faith. They are not beliefs. They are four realities to be observed, four tasks to be performed. They are a call to action, a pragmatic formula for liberation that is as logical and methodical as a medical protocol. The Buddha was often called the Great Physician, the Mahabhishak, because his approach to human suffering was precisely that of a master healer. He saw that all beings were afflicted with a deep spiritual sickness, and he laid out a complete, four-step program to move from that sickness to a state of radiant and lasting health. This four-step program is the Four Noble Truths, and it provides the map for our entire journey forward. Each truth has both a recognition and a corresponding task. The first noble truth, as we have explored, is the truth of dukkha. The physician's first step is to state the diagnosis clearly. There is an illness. The task for the patient is to understand and acknowledge this illness. This is a step of profound and courageous honesty. It is the willingness to stop pretending that everything is fine, to stop papering over the cracks in our experience with fleeting distractions and forced positivity. It is the moment we finally turn and face the subtle vibration of the off-center wheel. We look at the obvious pain in our lives, the dukkha of sickness, loss, and grief. We observe the more subtle suffering woven into our happiness, the viparinama dukkha that arises because all pleasant things must change and pass away. And we begin to sense the deepest, most pervasive layer of unease, the the sankhara dukkha, the background anxiety that comes from being a conditioned, impermanent being in a constantly shifting world. The task here is not to become overwhelmed by this, but simply to see it clearly, without judgment. We are not to be discouraged by the diagnosis. On the contrary, we are to be relieved, because a problem that is clearly seen is a problem that can be addressed. By fully understanding the nature of our dis-ease, we have completed the first and most essential part of the healing process. We have admitted there is a problem. The second noble truth is the truth of the origin of dukkha. Having diagnosed the illness, the physician now identifies its cause. There is a specific cause for this illness. We have seen that this cause is Tanha, the relentless thirst. It is the craving for sense pleasures, the craving to become something we are not, and the craving for our unpleasant experiences to be annihilated. The task corresponding to this second truth is to let go, to abandon. Once the cause of the illness has been identified, the clear instruction is to remove the cause. If a doctor tells a patient that their chronic cough is caused by smoking, the prescription is simple: stop smoking. In the same way, the Buddha tells us that our inner turmoil is caused by the fires of craving. The task, then, is to stop adding fuel to these fires. This is not an act of violent suppression. We do not fight our cravings. Rather, through mindfulness and wisdom, we begin to see their true nature. We see that they promise a satisfaction they can never deliver. We see that they are impersonal, conditioned habits of the mind, not essential commands we must obey. By seeing them clearly, our clinging to them naturally begins to loosen. We don't have to rip the thirsty thoughts from our mind. We simply stop serving them. We stop believing their seductive and empty promises. The abandonment of Tanha is a process of gentle release, of unclenching a fist that has been tight for a very long time. This brings us to the third noble truth, the most hopeful and luminous of the four. This is the truth of the cessation of dukkha. This is the physician's prognosis, the moment they lean in and say, "I have good news. Your illness is not terminal. In fact, it is completely curable. There exists a state of perfect, lasting health. This state of health, this complete cessation of dukkha, is called nirodha, which leads to the state known as nibbana in Pali, or nirvana in Sanskrit. This word has been as misunderstood as dukkha. Nirvana is not a heaven-like place we go to after we die. It is not a state of blissful blankness or self-annihilation. The word literally means to extinguish or to blow out. What is extinguished? The three fires that fuel all of our suffering: the fire of greed, the fire of hatred, and the fire of delusion. It is the complete and utter cessation of Tanha. When the thirst is gone, the suffering it causes is also gone. It is a state of profound peace, unshakable freedom, and supreme clarity that can be realized and experienced in this very life, right here and now. It is the end of the unseen noise. It is the complete calming of the monkey mind. It is the perfect, smooth turning of the wheel on its axle. It is not the acquisition of something new, but the uncovering of the mind's own natural, pristine state of peace that has always been there, obscured by the clouds of craving. The task associated with this third truth is to realize it. It is to know for ourselves that this freedom is possible. This truth provides the ultimate motivation, the shining beacon that gives us the strength and inspiration to undertake the journey. Without this hope, without this promise of a cure, we would have no reason to follow the doctor's prescription. And that leads us to the fourth and final noble truth, the truth of the path to the cessation of dukkha. The physician has diagnosed the illness, identified the cause, and assured us a cure is possible. Now, they hand us the prescription. They say, "Here is the medicine. Here is the exact step-by-step treatment plan you must follow to realize that state of health." This treatment plan, this path, is known as the Noble Eightfold Path, or Magga. It is a comprehensive guide for living, a blueprint for the cultivation of a wise and compassionate life. It is not a linear sequence of steps, but 8 interwoven factors that support and deepen one another, much like the strands of a strong rope. These 8 factors are often grouped into 3 essential trainings. First is the training in wisdom, Panna, which includes right view and right intention. Second is the training in ethical conduct, Sila, which includes right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And third is the training in mental discipline, Samadhi, which includes right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. The task associated with this fourth truth is to cultivate it, to develop it, to actually walk the path. It is not enough to know the prescription, we must take the medicine. It is not enough to have the map, we must take the steps. So here we have it, the complete framework of the great physician, elegant in its simplicity and profound in its scope. First, understand the illness of dukkha. Second, let go of its cause, Tanha. Third, realize the possibility of its cure, nirvana. And fourth, cultivate the medicine that leads to that cure, the noble Eightfold Path. It is a perfect, logical progression that moves from problem to cause, to possibility, to path. It is a framework of ultimate optimism, rooted in the most uncompromising realism. It is not a system of belief, but a call to active engagement with our own lives. We have now seen the full diagnosis and the life-altering prognosis. We have been handed the prescription from the great physician. Our work, our true journey, begins now. We must open this prescription and begin to understand each of its healing ingredients, one by one. Our next step is to begin walking this noble path, starting with the very foundation upon which all else is built, the cultivation of true wisdom. We now stand at the threshold of the path itself. The great physician has given us the complete framework of the Four Noble Truths, a map that shows us where we are, what caused our condition, where the destination of true health lies, and the name of the path that leads there. That path is the Noble Eightfold Path. It is essential to understand that this is not a sequence of 8 linear steps to be completed one after another. Rather, it is a set of 8 interwoven principles that are to be cultivated simultaneously. Each factor supports and deepens all the others, like the strands of a single, powerful rope that can pull us from the shore of suffering to the shore of liberation. But while they are cultivated together, our exploration must begin somewhere, and it begins with the foundation upon which everything else is built, the cultivation of wisdom, or Panna. The wisdom group consists of the first 2 factors of the path, right view and right intention. We start here because our perspective is the rudder that steers the ship of our life. Without a clear and accurate view of the territory, our efforts, no matter how sincere, can lead us astray. Before we can act correctly, we must first learn to see correctly. The first factor of the path is samaditthi, or right view. This is perhaps the most crucial element of the entire path, but the term right view can be misleading. This does not mean holding the correct set of opinions, memorizing religious doctrines, or being able to win a philosophical debate. It has nothing to do with dogma. Right view is the simple, direct, and non-conceptual seeing of reality as it truly is, free from the distortions of our ego, our fears, our desires, and our deep-seated conditioning. It is the experiential understanding of the very truths we have spent our time investigating. At its most fundamental level, right view is the clear seeing of the Four Noble Truths in our own life. It is the ability to recognize, this feeling of anxiety, this is dukkha. It is to see a craving arise and recognize, this is tanha, the cause of dukkha. It is to have an unshakable confidence that a state of peace free from this craving is possible, and that the Eightfold Path is the way to realize it. Furthermore, right view is the direct, experiential understanding of the great laws of existence we have explored. It is the understanding of karma, seeing clearly in our own lives how our wholesome intentions lead to peace, and our unwholesome intentions lead to conflict and suffering. It is the deep seeing of anicca, or impermanence, recognizing that everything in our experience, every thought, every feeling, every physical sensation, every worldly situation is in a constant state of flux. And it is the penetrating insight into anatta, or no self, the realization that what we call ourself is not a solid, unchanging entity, but a dynamic, selfless process. The opposite of right view is wrong view. Wrong view is the default setting of the untrained mind. It is the view that happiness can be found through accumulating external things. It is the belief that things are permanent and reliable. It is the deeply ingrained conviction that there is a solid, separate self that must be protected and promoted at all costs. This view, born of ignorance, is the very lens that creates the world of dukkha. There is a beautiful story that illustrates the difference. Two people are walking at night and come upon a puddle of muddy water. The first person looks down and sees only the mud, the dirt, the murkiness. He feels disgust and annoyance and quickly walks around it. His view is limited to the surface appearance. The second person also looks at the same puddle, but because his perspective is different, he sees something else entirely. He sees the perfect, brilliant reflection of the full moon. He sees the beauty and the vastness of the cosmos captured in a simple patch of muddy water. Right view is the ability to see the moon in the puddle. The world may present us with the mud of difficult situations, of pain, of conflict. Wrong view gets stuck on the mud, reacting with aversion and craving. Right view has the clarity to see the deeper truth, the potential for wisdom and peace that is always present, reflected even in the most challenging circumstances. Developing right view is a gradual practice. It begins with what we are doing right now, learning the concepts, examining the map. This is called conceptual right view, but it must be deepened through the practice of mindfulness and meditation until it becomes a direct, non-conceptual, and unshakable insight into the nature of reality. This clear seeing is the compass that ensures our journey is always pointed toward liberation. If right view is the compass that shows us the correct direction, the second factor of the path, samma sankappa, or right intention, is the conscious act of steering the ship in that direction. If right view is the wisdom of the mind, right intention is the wisdom of the heart. It is the why that fuels our journey. It is our motivation, our resolve, our aspiration. It is the quality of our inner drive. The Buddha taught that our intentions are what shape our world. They are the seeds of our future karma. Right intention, therefore, is the practice of consciously aligning our will with our understanding, of transforming our inner world so that our actions flow from a place of clarity and compassion rather than from confusion and craving. The Buddha outlined 3 specific types of right intention, which stand in direct opposition to the 3 poisons of the mind. The first is the intention of renunciation, or nekkhamma. For a modern audience, the word renunciation can sound severe, conjuring images of self-deprivation and austerity. But this is a misunderstanding. The intention of renunciation is not about punishing ourselves or rejecting the world. It is the wise and compassionate intention to let go of our clinging to the things that cause us suffering. It is the direct antidote to kama tanha, the thirst for sense pleasure. Having seen through right view that chasing after fleeting pleasures on the hedonic treadmill is an exhausting and futile game, we cultivate the intention to find our joy elsewhere. We begin to value simplicity over complexity, contentment over constant acquisition, and inner peace over outer excitement. It is the intention to free ourselves from the slavery of more. It is a turning away from the cluttered and noisy world of grasping, and a turning toward the spaciousness and peace of letting go. The second is the intention of loving kindness, or abhyapada. This is the direct antidote to the poison of ill will, anger, hatred, and aversion. It is the conscious cultivation of a heart of unconditional goodwill. It is the sincere wish for the well-being and happiness of all living beings, without exception. This intention must begin with ourselves. We cultivate a mind that is kind and forgiving toward our own imperfections. From that foundation, we extend it outward, to our loved ones, to our friends, to neutral people, and, most challengingly, to those we find difficult or have caused us harm. It is the active intention to meet the world not with a closed fist of judgment and resentment, but with an open hand of warmth and acceptance. When we have right view, we see that all beings are suffering from dukkha, just as we are. This seeing naturally softens the heart and gives rise to the intention of goodwill, the wish that they too may be free from their suffering. The third is the intention of harmlessness, or avihimsa. This is the direct antidote to the poison of cruelty and violence. It is the active intention not to cause harm, in thought, word, or deed, to any living creature. This is the foundation of a truly ethical life. It is the heart's natural response to the reality of suffering. When we truly see the pain in the world, the natural response of a sensitive heart is to not want to add to it. The intention of harmlessness is compassion in action. Compassion, or karuna, is more than just goodwill. It is the heart's trembling in the face of suffering, coupled with the sincere wish to alleviate that suffering. This intention guides us to be gentle in our actions, mindful in our speech, and watchful of our thoughts, ensuring that we do not become a source of pain for ourselves or for others. Together, right view and right intention form the wisdom section of the path. They are inextricably linked. Right view provides the understanding that motivates right intention. Right intention gives heart and purpose to the clarity of right view. The map is useless without the will to travel, and the will to travel is directionless without the map. Together, they ensure that our spiritual journey is not a cold, intellectual exercise, but a warm, heartfelt, and clear-sighted path. They ensure that we are not just accumulating knowledge, but are fundamentally transforming the very ground of our being. But a map and a noble intention, while essential, are not enough to complete a journey. The ship must be seaworthy, and the crew must act with discipline. Wisdom must be translated into how we actually live in the world, how we interact with others, how we move through our day. It must be embodied. This brings us to the next essential training on the path, the cultivation of sila, or ethical conduct, which encompasses how we use our speech, our actions, and our livelihood to create a world of greater peace. Having established the foundation of wisdom with right view and right intention, we now move to the next stage of the path, where this inner clarity is translated into outer expression. Wisdom that remains purely theoretical, locked away in the mind, is incomplete. The path of liberation is not an intellectual exercise. It is an embodied journey that transforms every aspect of our lives. This brings us to the second great training of the Noble Eightfold Path, the training in sila, or ethical conduct. This group comprises three factors: right speech, right action, and right livelihood. It is here that our intention to do no harm and to cultivate goodwill becomes a living reality in our interactions with the world. It is crucial to approach this training not as a set of restrictive, moralistic rules handed down from on high. This is not about being good in order to please a god or to earn points for a heavenly reward. Sila is best understood as a skillful and compassionate training in harmlessness. Its purpose is twofold. First, it protects others from the harm that our unskillful actions might cause. Second, and just as importantly, it protects our own mind. When we act and speak in ways that are unethical, it creates agitation, remorse, guilt, and fear in our own heart. A mind that is agitated by guilt and fear cannot become calm, clear, or concentrated. Therefore, sila is the essential groundwork. It is the act of creating a stable and peaceful foundation upon which the deep work of meditation can be built. We begin with the first factor of ethical conduct, samavaka, or right speech. We often underestimate the sheer power of our words. A single word can start a war or broker a peace. It can lift someone from despair or push them deeper into it. Our speech is one of the primary ways we create our reality and influence the reality of others. It is a constant stream of action, a continuous planting of karmic seeds. To practice right speech is to become a guardian of this powerful faculty, to use it with the precision and care of a surgeon as a tool for healing rather than for harm. The Buddha taught this practice in two ways: by outlining what to abstain from and what to cultivate. There are 4 types of unskillful speech to abstain from. The first is lying. This is more than just avoiding telling direct falsehoods. It is a deep commitment to living in harmony with reality. When we lie, we create a complex and stressful inner world. We have to remember our lies, build stories around them, and live in fear of being discovered. Truthfulness, by contrast, creates simplicity and peace. It builds trust in our relationships and fosters a clarity in our own mind. The second is divisive speech, or slander. This is the act of speaking in a way that turns one person or group against another. It is the poison of gossip that damages reputations and destroys communities. The practice here is to abandon this habit and instead, to speak in ways that encourage harmony and understanding. If we cannot speak to bring people together, it is often better not to speak at all. The third form of wrong speech is harsh speech. This includes yelling, insulting, name-calling, verbal abuse, and even sarcasm when its intent is to wound. This is verbal violence. It may not leave a physical scar, but it can create deep and lasting emotional wounds in others, and it coarsens our own heart. The practice is to cultivate speech that is gentle, kind, and pleasant to the ear. even when we must deliver a difficult message. The fourth is idle chatter. This is pointless talk, meaningless gossip, and conversation that serves no purpose other than to fill silence or to dissipate our mental energy. In a world saturated with information and noise, the practice of abandoning idle chatter is a radical act of preserving our own focus and inner quiet. This does not mean we must be somber and silent all the time, but it encourages us to speak with purpose and intention. The ancient Greek philosopher Socrates provided a wonderful tool for this practice, often called the three sieves. Before you speak, he suggested, let your words pass through three filters. First, is it true? Second, is it kind? And third, is it useful or necessary? If what you are about to say does not pass through all three of these sieves, then it is very often better left unsaid. This simple practice alone can transform our relationships and bring a profound sense of integrity and peace to our communication. The second factor in this group is sammakamanta, or right action. If right speech concerns our verbal conduct, right action concerns our physical conduct. It is the practice of training our body to be an instrument of peace, safety, and kindness in the world. Just like right speech, it is primarily defined by three actions from which we abstain. The first is abstaining from the taking of life. This is the bedrock of a non-violent ethic, a deep respect for the life force that flows through all beings, from the smallest insect to a human being. It is a commitment to protect life rather than to destroy it. This practice softens the heart and helps us to see ourselves not as separate from, but as part of the great web of life. The second is abstaining from taking what is not given. At its most basic level, this means not stealing, but its deeper meaning is about cultivating a mind of generosity and contentment. It is the practice of respecting the belongings of others and being satisfied with what we have, rather than constantly grasping for what we do not. It is a direct counteraction to the energy of greed. The third is abstaining from sexual misconduct. This principle guides us to bring mindfulness and compassion into our sexual relationships. It means avoiding any sexual expression that causes harm, that involves exploitation, deceit, or coercion. It is about honoring our commitments and the commitments of others, ensuring that our sexuality is an expression of mutual respect, kindness, and connection, rather than a selfish act of mere gratification. For the lay practitioner, these three principles, protecting life, respecting property, and honoring sexual commitments, form a clear and powerful guide for embodying harmlessness. They are not meant to be a source of guilt, but a source of joy. Living within these precepts creates a life of profound integrity. It generates a feeling of blamelessness, a sukha, or happiness, that is deep and unshakable because we know we are not a source of danger or harm to the world. We can rest easy at night, knowing that our physical presence on this earth is a peaceful one. The third factor of ethical conduct is samma ajiva, or right livelihood. This is a brilliant and practical extension of ethics into the area where most of us spend the majority of our waking lives, our work. The Buddha understood that it would be very difficult to cultivate a peaceful mind if one's daily work involved causing harm. Right livelihood asks us to look honestly at how we earn our living and to see if it supports our spiritual path or undermines it. In the ancient texts, the Buddha gave 5 examples of livelihoods to be avoided: dealing in weapons, dealing in living beings, which includes slavery and animal slaughter, raising animals for slaughter, and dealing in poisons and intoxicants. The principle behind these specific examples is what matters for us today. The core principle of right livelihood is to engage in work that does not cause harm to oneself or to others, and ideally, contributes positively to the world. This calls for a deep and honest self-inquiry. We must ask ourselves, does my work require me to violate the principles of right speech by being deceptive or manipulative? Does it require me to violate the principles of right action by contributing to violence, exploitation, or the destruction of the environment? Does my work actively promote the poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion in the world, for instance, by creating addictive products or by stoking social division? Does it leave me feeling spiritually compromised and exhausted at the end of the day? For many of us, our current jobs may fall into a gray area. We may not have the freedom to simply quit and find a new career. The practice of right livelihood does not demand this. It begins where we are. It begins by bringing an ethical intention into our existing work. Within our current role, how can we be more honest? How can we be more helpful to our colleagues and customers? How can we minimize harm and maximize benefit? It is about seeing our work not just as a means to a paycheck, but as a field for practice, a place to cultivate our integrity and compassion. Together, these three practices of right speech, right action, and right livelihood form the beautiful and indispensable training of Sila. They are the way we manifest wisdom in our lives. They are what it looks like to live a life guided by an intention of harmlessness and goodwill. But their function is also deeply psychological. By living in this way, we create a life free from the inner agitation of remorse, guilt, and fear. We create a conscience that is clear and a heart that is at ease. This inner tranquility is the essential soil in which the seeds of meditation can grow. It is impossible to achieve deep states of concentration when the mind is constantly troubled by the memory of a harmful word or a regretful action. Sila is the act of calming the waters so that we can finally see the reflection of the moon clearly. By cultivating this ethical foundation, we create a life of outer peace and inner integrity, the perfect conditions for the next stage of our training, the deep and transformative work of training the mind itself. This brings us to the heart of meditative practice, the group of trainings known as samadhi, or mental discipline, beginning with the crucial factor of right effort. Having laid the foundations of our path with the wisdom of right view and the ethical embodiment of Sila, we now venture deeper. The journey inward requires more than just a map and a moral compass. It requires a direct and unflinching look into the fundamental nature of reality itself. The Buddha taught that all of conditioned existence, everything we can possibly experience, is characterized by three fundamental marks, or seals. These are the tilakkhana, the three marks of existence: anicca, impermanence; dukkha, unsatisfactoriness; and anatta, no, self. We have seen how they are interwoven. We experience dukkha precisely because we cling to things as if they were permanent, and we believe there is a solid self that needs to do the clinging. Now, we will turn our full attention to anicca, for it is the deep, experiential understanding of impermanence that has the power to unravel our clinging at its very root. Like the other great truths, the teaching on impermanence is not a depressing philosophy proclaiming that all is futile. It is a liberating truth that frees us from the exhausting and impossible struggle of trying to hold on to that which cannot be held. Our suffering does not arise from the fact that things change. It arises from our resistance to this fact. It comes from our attempt to build a permanent fortress on the shifting sands of time. We can begin our investigation by looking at the world around us. The evidence of anicca is everywhere, so pervasive that we often fail to see it. We see it in the grand cycles of nature, the relentless turning of the seasons, the daily rising and setting of the sun, the waxing and waning of the moon. We see it in the slow, powerful erosion of mountains, in the coastlines reshaped by the patient work of the ocean. We see it in the life cycle of a forest, where great trees rise, flourish for centuries, and eventually fall, becoming nutrient-rich soil for the saplings that will take their place. Nothing in the material world is static. The new car we cherish eventually gets its first scratch, then a dent, and slowly succumbs to rust and mechanical failure. The fashionable clothes we buy will one day look dated, their fabrics wearing thin. The very homes we live in, which seem so solid and permanent, are in a constant, slow state of decay, demanding maintenance to fend off the inevitable effects of time and weather. Intellectually, we all know this. We do not expect summer to last forever. We know that our possessions will not last, but our emotional and habitual minds operate on a different principle. They operate on a deep-seated assumption of permanence, constantly seeking security and stability in a world whose very nature is flux. This mismatch between our deep-seated desire for permanence and the universal reality of impermanence is a primary source of our disappointment, anxiety, and grief. Now, let us bring this investigation closer to home, to the most intimate physical object we know, our own body. Our body is perhaps the most powerful and undeniable teacher of impermanence. We witness its constant change throughout our lives. We see it grow from the helplessness of infancy, through the energy of childhood and adolescence, into the prime of adulthood. and then, inevitably, into the gradual decline of old age. We may try to fight this process with creams, dyes, and surgeries, but we are engaged in a battle we can never win. The body is a river, not a statue. On a much deeper level, modern science confirms what the Buddha knew through introspection. Our bodies are not solid, unified objects. They are bustling ecosystems, colonies of some 30 trillion cells, all engaged in a frantic dance of birth, life, and death. The cells that constitute your skin, your bones, and your organs are constantly dying and being replaced. It is said that in roughly 7 years, nearly every cell in your body will have been replaced. The physical person you were 7 years ago literally no longer exists. So where is the solid, continuous me? We also experience Anicca vividly in the changing states of our health. One day we feel vibrant and full of energy. The next, we may be struck down by a cold or a fever. Health is a temporary condition. Sickness is a temporary condition. To see this is to relate to our bodies with greater wisdom and less fear. When we are healthy, we can appreciate it as a precious and fleeting gift. When we are sick, we can meet the experience with more patience, knowing that this too shall pass. The most crucial and transformative arena for observing impermanence, however, is the landscape of our own mind. If the physical world changes slowly, our inner world of thoughts and feelings changes with lightning speed. Let us look at our feelings, the aggregate of Vedana. A moment of pure joy arises, perhaps from seeing a loved one or hearing a beautiful piece of music. We instinctively cling to it. This is wonderful. I want this to last forever. But where does it go? Inevitably, it fades, replaced by a neutral feeling, or perhaps even a sad one. A wave of sadness or loneliness washes over us. We instinctively resist it. Go away. I don't want to feel this. But our resistance only adds a layer of suffering. The second arrow. The sadness, too, eventually subsides. A flash of anger, hot and intense, appears in the mind. If we do not act on it, if we simply watch it, we can witness it burn itself out, like a fire with no fuel. Our feelings are like the weather, unpredictable, uncontrollable, and always changing. To find peace is not to try and control the weather, but to learn to be a calm and spacious sky in which all weather can come and go without resistance. Our thoughts are even more ephemeral. They are like clouds drifting through the sky of our awareness. One moment a thought about work, the next a memory from childhood, then a plan for dinner. We take our thoughts so seriously, believing them to be me or my opinion. But seeing their impermanent nature is profoundly liberating. We realize we don't have to believe every thought that pops into our head. We don't have to identify with every passing mood or opinion. We can simply let them arise and pass away, like clouds in the sky, without getting caught up in their drama. This is the direct path to taming the monkey mind. There is no story that captures the painful, yet ultimately healing, journey of accepting impermanence more powerfully than that of Kisa Gotami. She was a young woman in the time of the Buddha whose only child had died. Consumed by an unbearable grief, she could not accept his death. She picked up his small body and went from house to house, desperately begging everyone she met for a medicine that could bring her son back to life. Some people mocked her, others pitied her, but no one could help. Finally, someone advised her to go and see the Buddha. She went to him, laid her child at his feet, and pleaded for a cure. The Buddha looked at her with immense compassion and said, "I can help you. But first, you must do one thing for me. Go into the village and bring me back a single mustard seed from a house where no one parent, a child, a spouse, or a servant has ever died." Hopeful, Kisa Gotami rushed to the village. At the first house, she asked for a mustard seed, and the family was happy to give it to her. But when she asked if anyone in their house had ever died, they looked at her sadly and said, "The living are few, but the dead are many. We lost our father just last year." She went to the next house, and the next, and the next. The story was the same everywhere. Every family had known loss. As the sun began to set, the profound truth of the Buddha's teaching dawned on her. Her unbearable personal tragedy was not unique to her. It was a universal law. Death and loss were not an accident, but an inescapable part of life for everyone. Her grief, once a sharp and personal agony, began to transform into a wide and deep compassion for all beings, who must endure this same law of change. With this realization, her clinging to her son's body loosened. She took him to the charnel ground, let him go, and returned to the Buddha, not as a grieving mother, but as a woman awakened to the profound truth of Anicca. To truly internalize the teaching of impermanence is to unlock a new way of living. It cultivates a profound sense of non-attachment. We can love people and enjoy our experiences fully, perhaps even more so, because we know they are precious and fleeting. We can hold them with an open hand rather than a clenched fist. It drastically reduces our fear. The constant, low-grade anxiety about losing what we have, our health, our relationships, our wealth, is eased when we accept that change is not a personal failure but the very nature of existence. And most importantly, it opens us up to the sacredness of the present moment. If we know that this moment, this breath, this conversation will never come again in exactly the same way, we are more likely to cherish it, to be fully present for it, rather than being lost in regrets about the past or worries about the future. It is the gateway to gratitude. Anicca is not a grim death sentence upon our happiness. It is the rhythm of the universal dance, and learning to flow with it is the definition of freedom, resilience, and peace. In seeing this universal nature of impermanence, that everything is in a constant state of flux, a question naturally arises. If everything is always changing, is this process simply random and chaotic, or is there a logic to its flow? If there is no solid self, and everything is a process, how do these processes relate to one another? The understanding that things do not exist or change in isolation, but arise and pass away in a web of intricate causal relationships, brings us to one of the most sublime and unifying teachings of the Buddha, the profound truth of interconnectedness, or as it is known, dependent origination. We have journeyed through the foundational truths of our existence. We have seen the reality of Dukkha and its cause in Tanha. We have deconstructed the illusion of the solid self through the lens of Anatta, and we have looked unflinchingly at the law of Anicca, the universal reality of impermanence, realizing that everything we experience is a constantly flowing river of change. This profound insight naturally gives rise to a critical question. If everything is in flux, is this process merely chaotic and random? If there is no permanent self controlling the show, what governs the relationship between one moment and the next? The Buddha's answer to this question is one of the most sublime and intellectually beautiful teachings in human history. It is the teaching of Paticcasamuppada, or dependent origination. This is the truth that completes the picture, the master key that unlocks the deepest secrets of reality. It shows us that existence is not a collection of separate objects, but a seamless, dynamic, and intricately interconnected web of relationships. The principle of dependent origination can be stated in a simple, elegant formula. When this is, that is. From the arising of this, that arises. When this is not, that is not. From the cessation of this, that ceases. This is the universal law of conditionality. It states that nothing, not a single object, not a single thought, not a single being exists in isolation. Everything comes into being in dependence upon other factors. It is empty of any independent, intrinsic existence. This teaching takes the insight of Anatta and expands it to a cosmic scale. Not only is the self empty of a solid core, but everything is empty in the same way. Yet, this emptiness is not a void. It is a vibrant, dynamic fullness, a plenum of radical interconnectedness. To make this less abstract, let us look at a simple object, like a flower in a vase. Our ordinary perception sees a flower as a discrete, separate thing, but dependent origination invites us to look more deeply. Where is the flower? For this flower to exist, it needed a seed. The seed needed soil. The soil needed rain and minerals. The rain needed clouds, which were formed from evaporated water from oceans and lakes. The flower needed the sun for photosynthesis. It needed the air. It may have needed a gardener to plant it. And the gardener needed food, which came from a farmer, and so on. If you begin to remove all the non-flower elements, the sun, the soil, the rain, the air, you will find that there is no flower left. The flower is nothing but a temporary manifestation of these countless interconnected causes and conditions. It is empty of a separate self, but it is full of the entire cosmos. The Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh famously used the example of a simple sheet of paper. He would hold it up and ask his students to see the cloud in the paper. Without the cloud, there could be no rain. Without the rain, the tree could not grow. Without the tree, there could be no paper. So the cloud is an essential part of the paper. But so is the sunshine that helped the tree grow, the logger who cut the tree down, the wheat that made the bread the logger ate for breakfast, and the logger's parents who brought him into the world. If we continue in this way, we see that the entire universe is present in this single sheet of paper. The teaching of dependent origination asks us to see ourselves in the same way. We are not separate, isolated entities. We are a confluence, a meeting point. Our physical body is made of the food we have eaten, the water we have drunk, the air we have breathed, elements borrowed from the earth and sky. Our mind is a product of the ideas of our parents, our teachers, our friends, and our culture. Our every thought and feeling is conditioned by previous experiences and present circumstances. To see this is to be humbled, to let go of our arrogance and our sense of separateness, and to feel a profound sense of belonging to the great web of life. In the rich tapestry of Buddhist imagery, there is no metaphor more beautiful or more fitting for this teaching than the jewel net of Indra. In the heavenly palace of the god Indra, there hangs a magnificent net that stretches out infinitely in all directions. At every single node where the threads of the net cross, there is a perfectly clear, multifaceted jewel. The wonder of this net is that if you look at the polished surface of any one jewel, you will see reflected in it every other jewel in the entire, infinite net. And if you look even more closely, you will see that each of the jewels reflected in that one jewel also contains the reflection of all the others, creating a stunning, endless cascade of interreflection. This is the vision of reality that dependent origination reveals. Each of us, each sentient being, each atom, each event, is a single jewel in this cosmic net. We are distinct, yet we are not separate. Our very existence is defined by our reflection of, and in, all others. A change in one jewel, a flicker of light. A shift in color is instantly reflected in every other jewel. What happens to one of us, in a subtle but real way, happens to all of us. The practical implications of this vision are staggering, and they have the power to transform our lives and our world. The most profound implication is the arising of genuine, unshakable compassion, or karuna. As long as we operate under the delusion of a separate self, our compassion will always be limited. We feel for our family, our friends, our tribe. But when we truly see and feel our interconnectedness, the very distinction between self and other begins to dissolve. We realize that the suffering of another being is not separate from our own suffering. Their pain sends a tremor through the net that is felt in our own jewel. Harming another being is no longer just an unethical act. It becomes an act of self-harm, a deep misunderstanding of our own nature. Conversely, an act of kindness toward another is an act of kindness toward ourselves. To wish for another's happiness is to polish our own jewel, which in turn brightens the reflection in every other. Compassion ceases to be a sentimental emotion and becomes a wise and rational response to the way things truly are. This understanding also imbues our lives with a beautiful and profound sense of responsibility. If our every action, word, and thought sends ripples out across the entire net, then everything we do matters immensely. Our personal karma is not just a private affair, an act of generosity, a word of forgiveness, a thought of loving kindness. These seemingly small acts become cosmically significant. They are our contribution to the brightening of the entire net. This ancient teaching is also a powerful foundation for a modern environmental ethic. It shows us that the trees are our lungs, the rivers are our bloodstream, and the earth is our very body. To pollute the air, to poison the water, to destroy the forests, this is not harming some abstract entity called the environment. It is a direct assault on the very conditions that make our own existence possible. It is a failure to see that we are not masters of the net, but simply one jewel within it, completely dependent on all the others. On a psychological level, the Buddha applied this principle of conditionality to explain the chain reaction that leads to suffering. He showed how a sensory impression, if met with ignorance, leads to a feeling. The feeling, if we are not mindful, gives rise to a craving, or Tanha. The craving leads to clinging, and the clinging leads to the whole mass of suffering, or dukkha. But because this is a chain of dependent links, it can be broken. By understanding how the process works, we can find the weak link in the chain space between feeling and craving and insert the wedge of mindfulness. By seeing the process clearly, we can step out of the chain reaction. We are no longer helplessly dragged along by our conditioning. With this sublime vision of dependent origination, our intellectual journey into the foundational wisdom of the Buddha's path is complete. We see a reality that is impermanent, selfless, and profoundly interconnected. We have the map. We have a clear-eyed view of the terrain. We have seen that our suffering comes from fighting reality, and our freedom comes from understanding it and living in harmony with it. But a map, no matter how perfect, is not the journey itself. To skillfully navigate this world, to truly walk the path, we need to move from the realm of knowing to the realm of doing. We need to cultivate the practical tools that train the mind to see these truths directly in our own moment-to-moment experience. This brings us from the domain of wisdom to the very heart of the practice, the training of the mind itself, beginning with the foundational and indispensable tool of sati, or mindfulness. With the profound wisdom of Tanha as our map and the integrity of sila as our stable vessel, we now arrive at the heart of the journey itself, the direct training of the mind. This is the third great division of the Noble Eightfold Path, known as samadhi, or mental discipline. This is where the path moves from the conceptual to the experiential, from knowing about the truth to realizing it directly within our own consciousness. The foundational skill, the master tool upon which all deeper meditative states are built, is the seventh factor of the path, sammasati, or right mindfulness. In our modern world, the word mindfulness has become ubiquitous. It is praised by corporations, recommended by doctors, and sold as a technique for relaxation and productivity. While these benefits can be real, the popular understanding often misses the profound depth and transformative power of mindfulness as taught by the Buddha. It is essential to begin by clearing away some common myths. Right mindfulness is not about trying to empty your mind or stop your thoughts. This is the most common frustration for beginners. They sit down, try to stop thinking, and find that their mind is louder and more chaotic than ever. They conclude, "I can't do this. I'm a failure at meditation." The truth is, the goal has never been to stop thinking. The mind's nature is to produce thoughts, just as the heart's nature is to beat. Mindfulness is also not about forcing yourself into a state of artificial calm or bliss. It is not about replacing negative thoughts with positive ones. It is something far more simple, more gentle, and more radical. In its essence, mindfulness is the art of paying attention, on purpose, in the present moment, without judgment. It is the simple yet profound act of knowing what is happening in your experience while it is happening. For most of our lives, we live in a state of what could be called mindlessness. We operate on autopilot. Our body is in one place driving a car, washing the dishes, but our mind is somewhere else entirely, lost in regrets about the past or anxieties about the future. It is this division, this being lost in thought, that is the source of so much of our dukkha. Mindfulness is the practice of gently and repeatedly bringing the mind and body back into the same place at the same time. It is the practice of coming home. So how do we practice this? We need an anchor, something to hold our attention in the present moment. The Buddha taught that the most reliable and accessible anchor is always with us, our own breath. The practice of mindfulness of breathing, or anapanasati, is the foundational technique of Buddhist meditation. Why the breath? Because it is always happening in the present. You cannot take a breath that is in the past, nor can you take one that is in the future. Your breath is happening right now. It is also a neutral sensation, free from the heavy emotional charge of many of our thoughts. And it is a bridge between our conscious and unconscious worlds, reflecting our mental state perfectly. When we are agitated, the breath is short and shallow. When we are calm, the breath is long and deep. To begin, you don't need a special cushion or a silent monastery. You can simply find a comfortable place to sit, on a chair or on the floor. Allow your back to be upright but not stiff, in a posture of dignity. You can gently close your eyes or leave them softly open with a downward gaze. Then, You simply bring your awareness to the physical sensation of breathing. You might choose to place your attention at the tip of the nostrils, feeling the cool air entering and the warm air leaving. Or you might rest your attention on the abdomen, feeling the gentle rising on the in-breath and the gentle falling on the out-breath. That is the entire instruction. There is no need to change your breath, to control it, or to make it deeper. Your only job is to feel it, just as it is. Now, the most important instruction of all. Inevitably, after a few breaths, or maybe just one, your mind will wander. It will be carried away by a thought, a memory, a sound, a plan. This is not a mistake. This is not a failure. This is simply what minds do. The moment you realize, my mind has wandered, that moment of realizing is the magic of mindfulness. It is a moment of pure, non-judgmental awareness. And in that moment, your task is simply to gently acknowledge where the mind went thinking, planning, worrying, and then, with great kindness, as you would guide a lost puppy, gently escort your attention back to the anchor of the breath. You may have to do this 10 times or 100 times in a single 10-minute sitting. This is the practice. The practice is not about staying focused on the breath. The practice is the gentle, patient, and compassionate act of returning, again and again and again. Each time you return, you are strengthening the muscle of mindfulness. You are training your mind to be less reactive and more stable. A helpful way to understand the quality of mindful awareness is the parable of the gatekeeper. Imagine you are a gatekeeper at the main gate of a great walled city. Your job is not to chase after the people who come and go. It is not your job to judge them, to approve of some and disapprove of others. Your job is simply to be present at your post and to mindfully note who passes through the gate. A farmer enters, you note, a farmer. A merchant leaves, you note, a merchant. A group of soldiers marches past you, note, soldiers. In the same way, as you sit with your breath, your awareness becomes the gatekeeper. Your breath is your post. The thoughts, feelings, and sensations that arise are the visitors passing through the gate. A thought of worry arises. You don't have to believe it or fight it. You simply note, worry. A feeling of boredom appears. You note, boredom. A memory of a happy moment comes. You note, memory. You acknowledge their presence without leaving your post. And then you return your primary attention to the breath. You are not trying to get rid of the visitors. You are simply training yourself not to get lost and run down the street after them. While this formal sitting practice is essential for strengthening our mindfulness, the ultimate goal is to bring this quality of awareness into every moment of our lives. We can practice mindfulness informally at any time. You can try the practice of mindful eating. For one meal, put away your phone and turn off the television. Look at your food. Notice the colors, the shapes, the textures. Smell the aromas. When you take a bite, chew slowly. Notice the explosion of flavors. Notice the intention to swallow and the feeling of the food going down. You can practice mindful walking, feeling the contact of your feet on the ground with each step. You can have a mindful cup of tea, feeling the warmth of the mug in your hands, seeing the steam rise, and tasting each sip as if it were the first and only cup of tea in the world. These simple practices help us to break out of our habitual state of autopilot. They allow us to discover moments of peace, richness, and presence that are always available to us, right in the middle of our ordinary lives. Ultimately, the practice of mindfulness cultivates a profound shift in our sense of identity. A beautiful analogy is that of the sky and the clouds. Our true nature, our fundamental awareness, is like the vast, open, clear blue sky. It is inherently spacious, peaceful, and unstained. Our thoughts, our emotions, our moods, these are like the weather. They are the clouds, the storms, the sunshine, the wind. They arise in the sky, pass through the sky, and dissolve back into the sky. They are not the sky itself. For most of our lives, we identify with the weather. When a dark cloud of sadness appears, we say, I am sad. When a storm of anger rages, we say, I am angry. We believe we are the storm. Mindfulness is the practice of learning to identify with the sky. We learn to see that we are the spacious awareness in which sadness, anger, and joy happen. We can hold all of it, just as the sky holds all weather, without being damaged by it. we see that the thoughts and feelings are temporary events passing through us, not the core of who we are. This insight alone creates an incredible sense of freedom and resilience. In summary, right mindfulness is the simple but revolutionary art of being present with our own life. It is a practice of developing an intimate and friendly relationship with our own mind and body. It is the foundational skill that allows us to see the truth of impermanence and know self directly. And it is the necessary precursor to developing deeper states of calm and insight. But to truly strengthen this muscle of the mind, to allow our awareness to become not just stable but powerfully concentrated, it is helpful to engage in the formal, dedicated training of the mind that we call meditation. This brings us to the next factor of the path, where we deepen our practice and cultivate a mind that is both serene and sharp. This is the practice of right concentration. Having learned to bring moments of mindfulness into our daily lives, we have taken the first step in reclaiming our attention. We have learned to return home to the present moment, even if just for a short while. To truly strengthen this capacity, to transform the fleeting moments of mindfulness into a stable and enduring quality of mind, we turn to the practice of formal meditation. This is the workshop where we hone our tools. This practice culminates in the eighth and final factor of the noble Eightfold Path, Samma Samadhi, or right concentration. When we hear the word concentration, we might imagine a tense, forceful, furrowed brow effort. But in this context, Samadhi is quite the opposite. It is a state of mind that is collected, unified, serene, and joyful. It is the natural result of a mind that has been gently trained to rest in one place, free from its usual scatteredness and agitation. Meditation is the deliberate process of cultivating this state. It is the art of taming the wild horse of the mind, not by breaking its spirit, but by patiently and kindly teaching it to be steady, calm, and focused. In the Buddhist tradition, meditation can be seen as having two essential aspects, like the two wings of a bird. Both are necessary to fly. The first wing is samatha, which means tranquility, calm, or serenity. The primary purpose of samatha meditation is to still the agitated monkey mind. It is the practice of gathering the scattered fragments of our attention and unifying them on a single object. As we have seen, the most common and effective object for this practice is the breath. By continuously returning our awareness to the simple, physical sensation of breathing, we are practicing samatha. An excellent analogy for this process is a jar of muddy water. If you want to see through the water, you do not gain anything by stirring it more vigorously. The wise approach is to simply set the jar down and allow it to be still. Over time, without any further effort, the mud, the sediment, will naturally settle to the bottom, leaving the water clear and transparent. Our minds are like this jar of water, constantly stirred up by the sediment of our thoughts, worries, and plans. Samatha meditation is the act of setting the mind down, of letting it be still, so that its inherent clarity can emerge. As the mind settles, it naturally becomes more peaceful, and a sense of ease and even joy can arise. This state of calm clarity is the foundation for the second wing of meditation. The second wing is vipassana, which means insight, or clear seeing. Once the water in the jar has become clear, we can now look into it and see what is really there. Vipassana is the practice of using the calm, stable, and concentrated mind developed through samatha as a kind of microscope to investigate the true nature of our experience. With this clear and steady lens, we turn our attention inward and observe the five aggregates or body, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness. What do we see when we look with this newfound clarity? We see the three marks of existence directly, not as a philosophy to be believed, but as a lived reality. We watch a feeling arise, intensify, and then vanish, and we know for ourselves the truth of anicca, impermanence. We see how our mind's tendency to cling to a pleasant feeling or push away an unpleasant one creates a subtle tension, and we understand the truth of dukkha. We look for the thinker behind the thoughts or the feeler behind the feelings, and we find only an impersonal, flowing process, and we realize the profound truth of anatta. Samatha builds the stable platform, the clear laboratory. Vipassana is the investigative work that is done in that lab, the work that leads to wisdom and liberation. The two wings work together, creating a powerful, upward spiral. Greater calm allows for deeper insight, and deeper insight leads to even greater calm. The entire process can be understood through the parable of taming a wild horse. Our untamed mind is like a beautiful, powerful wild horse, full of energy and spirit, but running chaotically across the plains, driven by fear and desire. Our intention to practice meditation is like throwing a rope around the horse's neck. The sturdy post we tie the rope to is our object of meditation, the breath. At first, the horse will resist. It will pull against the rope, rear up, and try to run in every direction. This is the mind in the initial stages of meditation, constantly wandering, restless and agitated. Our job as the trainer is not to whip the horse into submission. This would only create more fear and resistance. Our job is to be patient, gentle, and consistently firm. Each time the horse runs to the end of the rope, we don't get angry. We simply stand by the post, holding the rope, gently guiding it back. Over time, with consistent practice, the horse begins to learn that its frantic struggles only lead to exhaustion, and that standing near the post is a place of rest. It begins to relax. Its pulling becomes less frequent and less violent. Eventually, it will stand peacefully by the post, calm and alert. This is the concentrated mind, the state of samadhi. Its powerful energy is no longer scattered and chaotic. It is collected, serene, and available to be guided by wisdom. As we undertake this training, it is important to know that the path is not always smooth. The mind will not become calm overnight. The Buddha, with his deep psychological insight, identified 5 common challenges that arise in meditation, known as the 5 hindrances. To know them is to be prepared for them, and to not be discouraged when they appear. The first is sensory desire. This is the mind being pulled away by fantasies about a pleasant sight, sound, taste, or other sensation. It is the mind planning a future pleasure or replaying a past one. The second is ill will or aversion. This is the mind being consumed by anger, resentment, irritation, or judgment, either towards ourselves for failing at meditation or towards others. The third is sloth and torpor. This is not simple physical tiredness, but a mental heaviness, a dullness, a sinking state of mind that leads to drowsiness and a lack of energy. The fourth is restlessness and worry. This is the monkey mind in high agitation, anxiety, the inability to settle, the mind flitting from one thought to another like a frantic bee. The fifth hindrance is skeptical doubt. This is the nagging voice that questions the practice. Is this really working? Note, questions the teacher, or most commonly, questions our own ability to succeed. I'm just not cut out for this. The practice when these hindrances arise is not to fight them, but to meet them with mindfulness. We learn to recognize them. Ah, this is sensory desire. Ah, this is sloth and torpor. By naming them, we separate ourselves from them. We see them as temporary mental states rather than who we are. For desire and aversion, we can gently note their presence and patiently return to the breath. For drowsiness, we can straighten our posture, brighten our attention, or even stand up for a moment. For restlessness, we can bring our attention more firmly into the physical body, feeling its weight and stability. For doubt, we can acknowledge it as just another thought and reaffirm our trust in the simple, patient process of returning to the breath. To sit in meditation is not to expect a peaceful state free from these hindrances. To meditate is to practice meeting whatever arasespeses, agitation, boredom, joy, or any of the 5 hindrances with the same unwavering, compassionate awareness. This is why meditation is not an escape from life. It is a courageous training for life. It is a dress rehearsal for meeting all of life's challenges with greater wisdom, balance, and grace. Through this dedicated, patient practice of calming the mind and seeing clearly, we are fundamentally rewiring our nervous system. We are weakening the old, conditioned habits of reactivity, craving, and aversion, and strengthening the new qualities of stability, clarity, and peace. The concentrated mind developed through samadhi is not the end goal of the path, but it is an indispensable tool. A mind that is calm, collected, and sharp is a mind that is capable of uprooting the deepest causes of suffering. It is a mind that can bear witness to pain without being overwhelmed, and a mind that can experience joy without clinging. It is, in its essence, a mind that is free. As we sit in meditation, we will inevitably encounter all aspects of our being. While we can meet all of them with bare awareness, the Buddha also taught specific active practices to cultivate wholesome states and counteract unwholesome ones. One of the most powerful hindrances is that of ill will and anger. To work with this energy directly, we turn to a specific form of meditation designed not just to calm the mind, but to warm the heart. This is the radiant practice of cultivating boundless, unconditional friendliness toward ourselves and all beings. This is the practice of Metta, or loving kindness. In the quiet workshop of meditation, as we sit with ourselves, we inevitably encounter the full spectrum of the human heart. While we learn to meet all experiences with mindful awareness, the Buddha also taught specific, active antidotes for our most corrosive mental states. Of all the hindrances that can poison the mind, none is more potent or more destructive than ill will, or Bhayapada. This is the family of aversion, which includes everything from subtle irritation and judgment to simmering resentment and explosive rage. It is the tight, contracted energy that closes our heart and separates us from the world. The specific, radiant medicine for this poison is the practice of metta bhavana, the cultivation of loving kindness. Metta is a Pali word that translates as unconditional friendliness, goodwill, and an active interest in the well-being of others. It is not the sentimental, conditional, or possessive love of romance. It is a boundless, steady, and courageous warmth of the heart. To practice metta is to engage in a radical act of rebellion against the mind's conditioned habit of criticism, judgment, and fear. It is the intentional cultivation of an inner sun whose warmth can melt the ice of anger and isolation, both in ourselves and in our relationships with others. The practice of metta begins in the most surprising, and for many, the most difficult place, with ourselves. In our culture, we are often taught that focusing on ourselves is selfish. But in the wisdom of this path, cultivating loving kindness for oneself is the essential and non-negotiable first step. You cannot pour water from an empty vessel. You cannot genuinely wish for others to be happy if you are at war with yourself. True compassion for others grows from the fertile soil of self-compassion. It is not selfish. It is the necessary foundation for a sustainable and authentic life of kindness. To begin this practice, we find our comfortable meditation posture. We let our awareness settle in the body, perhaps bringing a gentle attention to the area around our physical heart. We then begin the silent, gentle repetition of a few heartfelt phrases, directed inward. The traditional phrases are a beautiful expression of our most fundamental needs. May I be safe. May I be healthy. May I be happy. May I live with ease. We repeat these phrases slowly, like a gentle mantra, letting the intention behind them sink into our being. For many people, this first step can be incredibly challenging. When we try to offer ourselves kindness, our inner critic might roar to life with a list of all the reasons we are unworthy of it. Feelings of awkwardness, doubt, or even revulsion can arise. The instruction here is to be exceptionally patient. If the phrases feel hollow or untrue, you can modify them. May I learn to be safe. May I be willing to be happy. If even that is too much, you can let go of the words altogether and simply try to generate the feeling of warmth, perhaps by recalling a time when you felt genuinely cared for, or by imagining a warm, golden light filling your chest. Even the smallest flicker of warmth, the slightest softening around the heart, is a success. The goal is not to force a feeling, but to plant the seed of a kind intention. By patiently watering this seed, day after day, we begin to heal the deep-seated habit of self-criticism and create a safe and friendly inner environment. Once we have established a foundation of kindness for ourselves, we begin to extend that warmth outward in a structured sequence. The next step is to bring to mind a respected or beloved person. This could be a dear friend, a family member, a mentor, or a spiritual teacher. Choose someone for whom your heart feels a natural and uncomplicated sense of warmth and appreciation. Picture them sitting in front of you, happy and well. Then, directing the energy of your heart towards them, you repeat the same phrases. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be happy. May you live with ease. Let your heart fill with the genuine wish for this person's well-being. The purpose of this stage is to allow the feeling of metta to flow easily and to grow strong. Nourished by our natural affection for this person, we bask in this feeling, letting it become stable and bright. After spending some time here, we move to the next stage, extending metta to a neutral person. Bring to mind someone you see in your daily life, but for whom you feel neither like nor dislike. It could be the cashier at the grocery store, the person who delivers your mail, or someone you pass on your commute. We often move through our world seeing such people not as complex human beings, but as mere functions. This stage is a powerful practice for breaking down the walls of indifference. We bring the image of this person to mind, and we recognize that they, just like us, wish to be happy and to be free from suffering. We see their fundamental humanity, and we extend the same heartfelt wish to them. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be happy. May you live with ease. In this moment, a stranger is transformed from an object into a subject, a fellow being worthy of our goodwill. The circle of our heart expands. The final and most transformative stage of the practice is to extend metta to a difficult person. It is here that the practice reveals its true power to liberate the heart. Gently, we bring to mind someone with whom we have a conflict, someone who has hurt us, or someone we find irritating. It is wise to start with someone only mildly difficult, not the person who is the source of our deepest trauma. We bring their image to mind, and we acknowledge the pain or anger that arises. We do not deny it. But then, we try to see beyond their harmful actions to the suffering that may be motivating them. We recognize that people who act out of hatred, greed, or ignorance are themselves deeply unhappy. With this glimmer of understanding, we attempt to offer them the same wish, however faint it may be at first. May you too find peace. May you be free from your suffering. This act is not about condoning their behavior or forcing a reconciliation. It is a gift we give to ourselves. The Buddha taught that holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. We are the one who gets burned. The practice of metta for a difficult person is the courageous and healing act of putting down the hot coal. It is the choice to free our own heart from the prison of resentment. The sheer power of metta is not merely theoretical. It is illustrated in the dramatic story of the Buddha and the murderer, Angulimala. Angulimala was a terrifying killer who roamed the forests, murdering travelers and wearing a gruesome garland of their fingers around his neck. Everyone feared him. One day, despite the warnings of the local villagers, the Buddha began to walk calmly down the road that led into Angulimala's forest. Angulimala saw him and began to run after him, sword drawn. But a strange thing happened. Though the Buddha was only walking at a normal pace, Angulimala, running with all his might, could not catch up to him. Exasperated, he yelled, "Stop, monk!" The Buddha, still walking, replied, "I have stopped, Angulimala. It is you who have not stopped." Confused, the murderer asked what he meant. The Buddha explained, "I have stopped doing harm to living beings. You have not." In that moment, faced with the Buddha's utter fearlessness and the radiant, unconditional loving kindness emanating from him, something inside Angulimala broke. The sheer force of this metta penetrated his hardened layers of rage and pain. He threw down his sword, prostrated at the Buddha's feet, and asked to become a monk. He was transformed, eventually becoming a fully enlightened arahant, a testament to the fact that no heart is beyond the reach of boundless compassion. Metta is not a weak or sentimental state. It is a profound and unshakable power. Loving kindness is the first of four such sublime states, known as the Brahma Viharas, or divine abodes. They are the four faces of a fully awakened heart. The second is compassion, or karuna, which is the heart's response to the sight of suffering, the sincere wish for all beings to be free from their pain. The third is sympathetic joy, or mudita, which is the heart's ability to rejoice in the happiness and success of others, the direct antidote to jealousy and envy. And the fourth is equanimity, or upekkha, the boundless, peaceful heart that can hold all of life's joys and sorrows with a steady, unwavering balance, loving all beings equally without attachment. The practice of cultivating metta is a journey of transforming our most fundamental emotional patterns. It is the specific medicine for the poisons of anger, fear, and resentment. It is a practice that protects us from our own reactivity, heals our relationships with others, and allows our heart to open to a feeling of deep and joyful connection with all of life. This powerful practice shows us that we can, with patient effort, actively cultivate wholesome states to work with specific difficult emotions like anger. But what about the other challenging visitors of the mind, such as grief, jealousy, or despair? The wisdom of the path teaches us not to fight these states either, but to meet them with a unique form of courageous acceptance. This brings us to the profound art of befriending all of our inner experiences, no matter how difficult they may seem. Having learned to cultivate the radiant warmth of loving kindness as a specific antidote to anger, we now turn our attention to the other inhabitants of our inner world. What do we do when our heart is visited not by anger, but by the deep, gray fog of grief? What is our practice when the sharp sting of jealousy arises, or the cold, paralyzing grip of fear? Our spiritual path must be robust enough to handle the full and often messy spectrum of human emotion. For most of us, our entire lives have been an unconscious struggle against these difficult feelings. Our relationship with them is one of war, and we typically deploy one of two losing strategies: suppression or indulgence. The wisdom of the path offers a third way, a middle path of emotional healing. It is not a path of war, but of peace. It is the radical and courageous practice of befriending our demons. The first strategy, suppression, is perhaps the most common in our society. It is the stiff upper lip, the "I'm fine," the determined effort to push our uncomfortable feelings down into the dark basement of the psyche. When sadness arises, we distract ourselves with work. When fear appears, we numb it with entertainment or alcohol. We become experts at avoiding our own inner life, believing that if we ignore a feeling long enough, it will simply disappear. But the mind does not work this way. The energy of these suppressed emotions does not vanish. It metastasizes. It transforms into chronic, low-grade anxiety, a nameless dread that hums beneath the surface of our days. It can manifest as depression, a state of exhausted shutdown after years of fighting an inner battle. It can even erupt in our bodies as unexplained headaches, digestive issues, and other physical ailments. The feelings we refuse to feel in our heart, the body ends up having to feel in its tissues. Eventually, the pressure in the basement becomes too great, and the door bursts open, leading to sudden, disproportionate emotional outbursts that leave us and those around us bewildered. Suppression is a strategy born of fear, and it is a strategy that always fails. The second failed strategy is the opposite extreme, indulgence. This is when we don't just feel an emotion, we become it. We are completely consumed and possessed by it. When anger arises, we are the anger. We feed it with a relentless inner monologue, replaying the story of how we were wronged, building a case, justifying our rage. We then act it out, lashing out with words or actions, spreading the poison. When sadness arises, we collapse into it. We become the sadness, drowning in a sea of self-pity, replaying every loss, convinced that the gray fog is the only reality. In the state of indulgence, we are a puppet, and the emotion is the puppeteer. We have no freedom, no wisdom, no choice. We are simply reacting, driven by the raw, blind energy of the feeling. This strategy also fails because it strengthens the very neural pathways of suffering we wish to escape. By feeding the emotion, we ensure its return, stronger than before. Both suppression and indulgence are forms of reactivity, born from a fundamental misunderstanding of what emotions are. The third way, the middle path, is the way of mindful presence. It is the practice of meeting our emotions not as enemies to be fought, nor as masters to be obeyed, but as guests to be welcomed, or as crying children to be held. This approach can be understood as a gentle, three-step process. The first step is to recognize when a difficult emotion arises. Instead of immediately pushing it away or getting swept up in its story, we simply and gently name it to ourselves. Ah, this is sadness. Fear is present in me right now. This is what jealousy feels like. This simple act of recognition is profoundly powerful. It immediately creates a sliver of space between our awareness and the emotion itself. We are no longer possessed by the feeling. We are the one who is aware of the feeling. The observer is not the observed. This is the beginning of freedom. The second step is to accept or to allow. Having recognized the feeling, our next move is to consciously drop our inner resistance to it. We give the emotion permission to be there. We stop fighting it. For just a moment, we lay down our weapons. This can feel counterintuitive. Our whole life we have been trying to get rid of these feelings, but it is the very act of trying to get rid of them that gives them their power over us. By allowing a feeling to be present without needing it to go away, we are cutting off its fuel supply of resistance. We are saying to our inner experience, "You are welcome here." The third and most transformative step is to embrace and investigate with kindness. We bring a gentle, friendly curiosity to the raw, physical experience of the emotion. Like a loving mother holding a crying baby, we hold the feeling in our compassionate awareness. We don't try to fix it or analyze it. We just offer it our presence. We can ask ourselves gentle questions. What does this sadness actually feel like in my body? Is it a heaviness in my chest? An emptiness in my stomach? What is the physical texture of this anxiety? Is it a vibration? A coldness? A tightness? We shift our attention from the mental story about the emotion to the direct, somatic energy of the emotion itself. When we do this, something remarkable happens. By meeting the raw energy with a kind and open awareness, we allow the emotion to be metabolized. We allow it to run its natural course and dissolve on its own, which it always will, if we do not add the fuel of story and resistance. This entire process is beautifully encapsulated in the story of the Buddha inviting Mara for tea. In Buddhist mythology, Mara represents the forces of temptation, distraction, and fear, all of our inner demons. On many occasions after his enlightenment, while the Buddha was in deep meditation, Mara would appear, trying to disturb his peace. One evening, the Buddha's faithful attendant, Anatta, saw a terrifying demonic form approaching and ran to the Buddha in a panic. Master, it is Mara. He is coming." The Buddha, remaining perfectly calm, simply opened his eyes and said, "I see him, Anatta. Do not be alarmed. Please, prepare a seat for our guest. We shall have tea." Anatta, though frightened, did as he was told. The Buddha then turned to the fearsome demon and said, "Welcome, Mara. I see you. Please, come and sit down." By meeting the demon not with fear, not with aggression, not with an attempt to banish him, but with calm recognition, acceptance, and even a gesture of hospitality, the Buddha completely disarmed him. A demon's power comes from our fear of it. When there is no fear, there is no power. Mara, having been seen and accepted, simply faded away. This is the practice of befriending our demons, our fear, our grief, our jealousy. They are our personal Maras. When we turn to face them, name them, "I see you, fear," and make space for them, "Have some tea," they lose their monstrous power over us. They become just energy, just visitors passing through the vast and open space of our awareness. When we practice in this way, we begin to realize that our emotions are not enemies at all. They are messengers, carrying vital information from our inner world. Fear is a messenger telling us that we feel a lack of safety or resources. Sadness is a messenger telling us that we have lost something or someone we cherish. Anger is a messenger telling us that a boundary has been violated or an injustice has occurred. The wise practice is to learn to listen to the message without being consumed by the messenger. By befriending the emotion, we can receive its information with clarity. Then, from a place of wisdom, we can choose how to respond to the situation, rather than simply reacting blindly from the raw energy of the emotion itself. The path to emotional freedom, therefore, is not found through battle, but through a courageous peace treaty. It is the willingness to be still, to turn inward, and to meet whatever we find there, with the gentle, steady, and unwavering light of mindful, compassionate awareness. It is the understanding that our hearts are vast enough to hold all of it, the joy and the sorrow, the light and the dark. By befriending our demons, we make the most profound discovery of all. They were never demons to begin with, but simply lost, wounded parts of ourselves, crying out to be seen, to be heard, and to be held in the warm embrace of our own loving attention. This profound practice of being fully present with our inner world, embracing both the storms and the sunshine, points to a larger, universal truth. The ultimate refuge from the turmoil of the past and the anxiety of the future is found not in changing our experience, but in fully inhabiting it. The only place where life truly happens The only place where peace can be found is in the singular, precious, and often overlooked sliver of time that we call now. This brings us to the discovery of the immense power of the present moment. Having explored the practices of mindfulness, meditation, and the compassionate embrace of our emotions, we arrive at the culmination of all these inner tools. They all point toward a single, simple, yet profoundly elusive destination, the present moment. We have learned how to be present with our breath, present with our feelings, present with our inner demons. This very quality of presence is the key that unlocks the greatest treasure of our lives, a treasure we so often overlook because we are too busy searching for it elsewhere. The human mind is a time-traveling machine. Though our bodies exist unfailingly in the here and now, our minds are rarely in the same place. We are phantom beings, our consciousness flitting constantly between the ghost-filled halls of the past and the misty, imagined landscapes of the future. This is not a personal failing. It is the deep, conditioned habit of the monkey mind. And yet, life itself is not happening in the past or the future. Life, in its entirety and all its richness, its vibrancy, its challenge, and its beauty is only ever happening in the slim, precious, and ever-present sliver of time that we call now. To be alive is to be present. To be lost in thought is to miss our own life. Let us first examine the prison of the past. For many of us, a significant portion of our mental energy is consumed by events that are over and can never be changed. We live as curators in a museum of our own history, constantly polishing the exhibits of our regrets and our glories. We get caught in painful loops of if only. If only I hadn't said that. If only I had taken that other job. If only they hadn't hurt me. We carry the heavy weight of guilt for past harms we have caused, and the smoldering resentment for past harms we have endured. This mental reenactment drains the vitality from the present moment. We cannot fully engage with the person in front of us because we are still arguing with a person from 10 years ago. We cannot appreciate the opportunities of today because we are still mourning the missed opportunities of yesterday. The other side of this coin is nostalgia. We cling to the good old days, to past successes, to a time when we felt younger, stronger, or happier. We compare the present unfavorably to this gilded memory, and in doing so, we rob the present of its own unique potential for joy. The liberating insight of the path is to see the past for what it is, a memory, a collection of thoughts and images appearing now. The past has no inherent power. It is a ghost. Its only power is the power we give it, by continually inviting it into the present moment and mistaking it for a living reality. The practice is not to erase the past, but to see it as a visitor passing through the awareness of the present, and to gently return our attention to what is actually, tangibly here. If the past is a prison of regret, the future is a mirage of anxiety. An equally large portion of our mental life is spent in a time that does not yet exist and may never exist in the way we imagine. The most common form of this is worry. We project ourselves into 1,000 possible negative scenarios. We pre-live our difficulties, suffering from them many times over in our imagination before they ever happen. We worry about our health, our finances, our children, our jobs. We create elaborate, terrifying fictions and then react to them with real, physical stress. Our bodies are flooded with cortisol and adrenaline in response to a threat that exists only in our minds. The other form of living in the future is fantasy, the deferral of our happiness. We live by the mantra, I will be happy when. I will finally relax and be happy when I get the promotion, when the kids are grown, when I buy the house, when I go on vacation, when I retire. We treat the present moment as a mere stepping stone, an inconvenient waiting room on the way to a future destination where our real life will begin. But what happens when we arrive at that destination? We find that it is just another now, and because we have never trained ourselves to inhabit the now, we are ill-equipped to enjoy it. So we immediately set a new future goal, and the cycle of deferring our lives continues. It is crucial here to distinguish between neurotic worry and skillful planning. The path does not advocate for a life without foresight. Skillful planning is a practical, creative activity done in the present moment. We can sit down with a calm mind, assess the facts, and make intelligent plans to create better conditions for our future. It is a tool. Worry, on the other hand, is a compulsive, repetitive, and unproductive thought loop. It is the monkey mind spinning its wheels in a groove of fear. going over the same ground again and again without arriving at any solution. Planning is a calm action of the present. Worry is an anxious obsession with a future that we cannot control. There is a classic Zen story that perfectly captures the essence of this teaching. A person is walking through a field and comes upon a ferocious tiger. In a panic, they flee. With the tiger in hot pursuit, they run to the edge of a high cliff, and with no other option, they grab onto a thick vine and swing down over the side. As they hang there, catching their breath, they look up and see the tiger, snarling and clawing at the cliff's edge above them. They look down and see another tiger, pacing on the ground below, looking up expectantly. Their situation seems hopeless. Then, as they cling to the vine, they see two small mice, one white and one black, emerge from a crevice and begin to nibble at the vine they are holding onto. They understand immediately. The white mouse is day, the black mouse is night, and time is gnawing away the very thread of their life. In this moment of absolute and inescapable peril, as they look at the cliff face, they notice a single, wild strawberry growing there. It is plump, red, and perfectly ripe. Reaching out with their free hand, they pluck the strawberry, put it in their mouth, and savor it completely. The story ends with a simple line, "How sweet it tasted." This parable is a metaphor for our life. The tiger above is the past we are running from, our regrets, our traumas. The tiger below is the future we fear: sickness, old age, death. The two mice are the relentless passage of time, eating away at our life. In this existentially fraught situation, where can life be found? It cannot be found in the past or the future. It can only be found in the direct, sensory experience of the present moment, the taste of the strawberry. The story teaches that even in the face of ultimate peril, joy, beauty, and life itself are available to us, if only we can arrive fully in the here and now. So how do we practice this? How do we learn to taste the strawberry of our own life? We use the tools we have already begun to cultivate. Our breath is our primary lifeline to the present. Each and every breath is happening right now. When you find your mind lost in the tigers of the past or future, you can use the simple sensation of the in-breath and the out-breath as an anchor to pull yourself back onto the solid ground of the present. Each breath is a new beginning, a chance to start over. We can also use our senses. The mind can only truly focus on one thing at a time. When it is lost in abstract thought, it is not engaged with sensory reality. We can consciously interrupt the loop of worry or regret by intentionally opening up our senses. What are 5 things you can see right now? Notice their color, their shape, their texture. What are 4 things you can feel? The texture of your clothes, the solid support of the chair, the temperature of the air on your skin. What are 3 things you can hear? What are 2 things you can smell? What is 1 thing you can taste? This simple exercise short-circuits the time-traveling mind and lands it squarely in the present. We can feel the aliveness in our own body, the tingling sensation in our hands and feet. The body is always, unfailingly, in the present moment. To connect with its sensations is to come home. The past is a memory. The future is an imagination. The only time we are ever truly alive is now. The present moment is not just one fleeting instant among many. It is the only moment there is. It is the only stage on which our life unfolds. The great spiritual search is often portrayed as a quest for something extraordinary or distant. But the profound wisdom of this path reveals that the treasure we seek is not in some other place or some other time. It is hidden in plain sight, in the overlooked simplicity of the present moment. By learning to befriend our minds, work with our emotions, and anchor ourselves in the now, we have gathered the essential inner tools for this journey. We have learned to tend to our inner garden. The final stage of our exploration is to see how this rich inner cultivation transforms our engagement with the outer world, our work, our relationships, our very definition of a meaningful life. We will now move from the inner tools to their worldly application, beginning with how we can bring this presence and wisdom into the heart of our daily activity, our livelihood. Having gathered the essential inner tools for our journey, the wisdom to see clearly, the meditative practices to calm and concentrate the mind, and the capacity to meet our inner world with presence and compassion, we now arrive at the final, crucial stage of our path. This is the stage of integration, a spiritual practice that remains confined to the meditation cushion or the philosophy book. is an incomplete practice. The ultimate purpose of this path is to transform not just our inner state, but our entire way of being in the world. It is about bringing the peace and clarity we cultivate in silence into the noise and complexity of our daily lives. And for most of us, there is no larger or more demanding area of our lives than our work. This brings us to the fifth factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, Samma Ajiva, or right livelihood. This is the practice of earning our living in a way that is honest, ethical, and in harmony with our deepest values. It is the application of wisdom and compassion in the marketplace. The principle of right livelihood is not a demand that everyone must quit their job to become a monk or a meditation teacher. It is a practical and compassionate recognition that the work we do for 40 or more hours every week has a profound impact on our state of mind. If our work requires us to act in ways that are harmful, deceitful, or exploitative, it creates a deep inner conflict. This inner conflict, this lack of integrity, acts like a constant source of friction, making true peace of mind impossible. Right livelihood, therefore, begins with a clear and honest investigation, guided by the fundamental principle of ahimsa, or harmlessness. We must ask ourselves, does the way I earn my living, directly or indirectly, cause harm? The Buddha gave 5 specific examples of livelihoods to be avoided in his time: dealing in weapons, dealing in living beings, which included slavery and the butchering of animals, dealing in meat, dealing in intoxicants, and dealing in poisons. For us in the 21st century, the principle remains the same, but the applications are far more complex and nuanced. Dealing in weapons is clear enough, but we can extend the principle to ask if our work supports conflict, violence, or oppression in any form. Dealing in intoxicants can be broadened to question work that knowingly promotes addiction, whether to substances, gambling, or even to the manipulative algorithms of social media that prey on our attention. Dealing in poisons could be interpreted today as working for industries that knowingly pollute our environment or produce products that are harmful to public health. The core question is a deep inquiry into causality and consequence. Does my company's business model rely on exploiting a vulnerable population? Does my industry's success depend on the destruction of natural habitats? Does my role require me to be dishonest or to manipulate people? This is not an inquiry meant to produce guilt, but one meant to awaken clarity. In our deeply interconnected global economy, it is rare to find a job that is perfectly pure, with no harmful ripple effects whatsoever. The purpose is not to demand an impossible purity, but to cultivate a clear direction, a commitment to move towards work that causes less harm and, ideally, contributes to the well-being of the world. This honest investigation may lead some to make radical changes in their careers, but for most of us, the practice begins in a much more subtle and accessible way. It begins by shifting our focus from the what of our job to the how. Even if the what is not ideal, we have immense freedom in how we perform our work. It is here that our job, no matter how mundane, can be transformed from a source of stress into a rich field for practice. We can bring right intention to our work, consciously choosing to perform our tasks with an attitude of service and helpfulness, rather than just getting through the day. We can bring right mindfulness to our work, focusing on one task at a time with our full presence, which not only reduces errors, but also transforms stress into focused energy. Most importantly, we can bring the ethical trainings of right speech and right action into every interaction. We can choose to avoid office gossip, to speak to colleagues with kindness and respect, to act with integrity, and to be a source of stability and support in our workplace. There is a story of 2 carpenters who are hired to build a set of chairs. The first carpenter works quickly and mechanically. His only thought is of the paycheck at the end of the day. He cuts corners where he can. His movements are efficient but joyless, and he produces a set of chairs that are functional but lifeless. The second carpenter approaches the task differently. He sees the work as a craft, an expression of his skill and presence. He respects the wood, honoring its grain and texture. He cares for his tools. He works with a focused, mindful attention, pouring his presence into every cut, every joint, every smoothing of the surface. He too receives the same paycheck, but he has produced more than just a set of chairs. He has created objects of beauty and integrity, and in the process, he has spent his day in a state of meditative, joyful creation. This is the potential that right livelihood offers us. Any work, whether it is coding a website, cleaning a floor, preparing a financial report, or raising a child, can be transformed into a noble craft when it is infused with mindfulness, care, and a wholesome intention. This approach requires us to challenge our culture's dominant definition of wealth and success. Conventionally, a good job is one that offers the most money, power, and prestige. Success is measured by the size of our home, the brand of our car, and our position on the corporate ladder. This entire model is fueled by Tanha, the thirst for more, and as we have seen, it is a direct path to Dukkha. Right livelihood invites us to adopt a wiser and more sustainable definition of wealth. It encourages us to cultivate the wealth of integrity, the deep inner peace that comes from knowing that our work is not at odds with our heart. It points us toward the wealth of contentment, the profound freedom of realizing how little we actually need to be happy, freeing ourselves from the stressful and endless pursuit of more. It asks us to value the wealth of time and presence, ensuring that our work does not consume our lives so completely that we have no energy left for our spiritual practice, for our relationships, or for simply being. This is not a call to abandon our worldly responsibilities. The need to provide for ourselves and our families is real and legitimate. The path is a middle way. It is about finding the skillful balance between our material needs and our spiritual values. It is the conscious practice of determining how much is truly enough. It is the wisdom to know when the pursuit of more money or a higher position will cost us more in stress and lost peace than it could ever provide in material comfort. It is about choosing to live simply so that others and the planet itself may simply live. Right livelihood is a deep and ongoing practice of self-inquiry. It is not a single decision, but a continuous series of choices that align our daily actions with our deepest aspirations. It is the understanding that our work is not separate from our spiritual life. It is a central part of it. It is how we vote every day for the kind of world we want to live in. By bringing this level of conscious, ethical intention to our work, we transform it from a potential source of conflict and stress into a powerful and noble expression of our path. This deep commitment to ethical conduct in our professional lives naturally highlights the profound importance of our daily interactions. And the primary tool we use to interact, whether with a colleague, a client, a family member, or a friend, is our speech. The words we use have the power to create connection or division, to heal or to wound, to clarify or to confuse. While we have already touched upon right speech as part of our foundational training in Sila, its power and nuance are so great that it deserves a deeper look as a practice in and of itself. We now turn our attention from the broad arena of our work to the specific moment-to-moment art of using our words not to harm, but to help and to heal. As we learn to bring a mindful and ethical awareness to our work, we see that nearly every aspect of our professional and personal lives is built upon the foundation of communication. The words we use are the primary tools with which we build our relationships, express our ideas, and shape our shared reality. A word can be a bridge or a wall. A sentence can be a balm or a blade. Our capacity for speech is a form of immense power, a creative and destructive force that we wield dozens, even hundreds of times a day, often with little thought or awareness. This brings us to a deeper exploration of the third factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, samavaka, or right speech. We have touched upon it as a cornerstone of ethical conduct, but to truly integrate it into our lives, we must see it not as a list of rules, but as a profound and dynamic practice of mindfulness, wisdom, and compassion in action. It is the art of transforming our every conversation into an opportunity to reduce suffering and cultivate peace, both for others and for ourselves. To understand right speech, we must first look with unflinching honesty at unskillful speech, the conditioned habits of communication that perpetuate conflict and pain. The Buddha identified 4 primary forms. The first, and most foundational, is abstaining from falsehood or lying. This practice goes much deeper than simply avoiding outright untruths. It includes the subtle deceptions of exaggeration to make ourselves look better, of omission to hide an inconvenient fact, and of so-called white lies told to avoid a moment of discomfort. The deepest lie of all is self-deception. where we refuse to acknowledge the truth of our own motivations or feelings. The practice of truthfulness is a commitment to living in reality. Psychologically, lying is an immense burden. It creates a stressful inner world of tangled narratives that we must constantly maintain, and it forces us to live with the low-grade fear of being discovered. More profoundly, it corrodes our own integrity. When we are not honest with others, it becomes more difficult to be honest with ourselves, and our capacity to see things as they truly are becomes clouded. Truthfulness creates simplicity, fosters trust, and clears the mind. The second form of unskillful speech is divisive speech, or slander. In our daily lives, this most often manifests as gossip. We must ask ourselves, why is gossip so seductive? It often arises from our own insecurity. By speaking ill of a third person who is not present, we create a false sense of intimacy and superiority with the person we are speaking to. It becomes us against them. We bond over a shared judgment. But this bond is fragile and based on a subtle form of violence. Divisive speech poisons the atmosphere of a family, a workplace, or a community. It erodes trust and plants seeds of suspicion. The practice of right speech is to consciously abandon this habit, to refuse to participate in it, and instead to speak in ways that highlight people's good qualities, that foster harmony, and that bring people together. The third form is harsh speech. This includes the obvious forms of verbal aggression like yelling, insulting, and cursing. But it also includes the more subtle and often more insidious forms of verbal violence, biting sarcasm, backhanded compliments, a tone of contempt, or brutal honesty that is used not to help, but to wound. Harsh speech is a venting of our own inner painer, frustration, our anger, our fear onto another person. It is an attempt to assert dominance or control. It always comes from a place of suffering. The practice here is to cultivate a habit of gentleness. It is to learn to speak to others, even during disagreements, with a tone of respect. It is to learn to communicate our needs and our boundaries clearly and firmly, but without the poison of aggression. The fourth and final form is idle chatter. This is speech that is empty, pointless, and purposeless. It is the kind of talk that fills time but offers no real connection or benefit. In our modern digital age, this has been amplified 1,000-fold. It is the endless stream of uninformed opinions, the compulsive sharing of trivialities, the echo chambers of outrage that consume our social media feeds. This constant chatter pollutes our minds. It scatters our precious attention, fills us with agitation, and makes it nearly impossible to experience the inner silence where wisdom can grow. The practice of abandoning idle chatter is not a vow of absolute silence, but a commitment to use our words with intention and purpose. The ancient parable of the three sieves offers a beautiful and practical guide for this. Before speaking, we are encouraged to mentally pass our intended words through three filters. The first sieve asks, "Is it true?" This filters out lies, rumors, and speculation. The second sieve asks, "Is it kind?" This filters out harshness, malice, and ill will. The third sieve asks, "Is it useful?" This filters out idle chatter and commentary that serves no purpose. If our words cannot pass through all three of these gates, they are very often best left unsaid for our own peace and the peace of others. To practice right speech, however, is not just about avoiding the unskillful. It is an active practice of cultivating speech that is healing and connective. This means speaking words that are, first and foremost, true and accurate. It means cultivating speech that is gentle, kind, and supportive, words that build up rather than tear down. It means speaking words that are beneficial and useful, that bring clarity, offer help, or inspire goodness. And it means speaking them at the right time, learning the profound wisdom of knowing when to speak and when silence is the most compassionate offering. This leads us to a deeper dimension of right speech, one that is often overlooked, the practice of deep listening. True communication is a two-way street. Much of the time, what we call listening is simply waiting for our turn to talk. We are formulating our response, our rebuttal, our own story, while the other person is speaking. We are hearing, but we are not truly listening. Deep listening, as taught by masters like Thich Nhat Hanh, is a form of meditation, a gift of our full presence. The sole purpose of deep listening is to give the other person the space to be heard, to help them empty their heart and feel the relief of being truly understood. We listen without judging, without interrupting, without planning our response. We listen with an open heart, with the intention to simply receive them as they are. This simple practice has the power to dissolve mountains of anger and misunderstanding. So often, the people in our lives do not need our advice or our solutions. They need the profound healing that comes from feeling seen and heard. To offer someone our silent, focused, and compassionate attention can be one of the greatest acts of kindness we can perform. In our modern world, these principles must also be extended to our digital lives. The keyboard can become a weapon of great harm. The perceived anonymity and distance of the internet can disinhibit us, making it dangerously easy to engage in harsh, divisive, and false speech. The practice of right speech calls us to bring the same level of mindful integrity to our typing as we would to our speaking. Before posting a comment, before sharing an article, we can run it through the 3 sieves. Is this true? Is this kind? Is this useful? This simple pause can prevent us from adding to the immense amount of toxicity and misinformation online. It is a commitment to make our digital footprint a force for clarity and harmony, not for more noise and division. Ultimately, right speech is a profound and continuous mindfulness practice. It is the application of right view and right intention to our every interaction. It asks us to be aware of the roots of our speech. Is it coming from a place of clarity, kindness, and generosity, or from a place of insecurity, anger, and greed? By training ourselves in this art, we discover that our words can become one of our greatest tools for healing. We learn that a truthful and kind word can illuminate a dark mind, soothe a wounded heart, and build a bridge between 2 people. We transform our conversations from automatic habits into conscious acts of creating a more peaceful and connected world. This practice of mindful, compassionate communication is the bedrock of all healthy connections, and it naturally leads us to examine the most intimate and often most challenging arena for our practice: our personal relationships. How do we bring this wisdom of non-clinging and the compassion of right speech into our connections with our partners, our family, and our closest friends? This brings us to the delicate art of learning to love freely. Having learned to bring mindfulness and integrity into our work and our speech, we now turn our attention to the most intimate and often most charged arena of human experience: our personal relationships. It is here, in our connections with partners, family, and close friends, that we experience our greatest joys and our most profound sorrows. It is here that the habits of the ego and the fires of craving can burn most fiercely. A spiritual path that does not touch upon and transform our way of loving is an incomplete path. The great challenge and the great opportunity in our relationships is to learn how to love fully, deeply, and generously, without falling into the painful trap of clinging and attachment. The wisdom of the path offers us a key to unlock this possibility by making a crucial distinction between genuine love and its skillful, yet suffering-inducing imposter, attachment. For most of us, what we call love is a complex mixture of genuine care and deep-seated attachment. Attachment, or upadana in Pali, is the energy of grasping, clinging, and possessing. It is a direct expression of Tanha, the thirst we explored earlier. It is not born from a place of generosity, but from a place of lack, from a feeling of inner emptiness. We look to another person to complete us, to fill a void within ourselves, to be the source of our happiness and our sense of self-worth. We turn another sovereign human being into a strategy for our own emotional security. This attachment is rooted in fear, the fear of being alone, the fear of being abandoned, the fear of not being enough on our own. When our love is entangled with attachment, it manifests in a host of painful and familiar ways. It shows up as jealousy, the fear-driven need to guard our possession from potential rivals. It manifests as control, the attempt to make the other person conform to our expectations and meet our needs. It creates a transactional dynamic, an unconscious scorekeeping of, I did this for you, so you owe me that. It fuels a constant, low-grade anxiety, a need for continuous reassurance that we are loved, that we are valued, that we will not be left. When the other person inevitably fails to live up to our idealized image, or to meet our endless needs, we feel not just disappointment, but a deep sense of personal injury and betrayal. This is because attachment is, by its very nature, conditional. It says, I will love you if you make me feel good, if you behave in the way I want, if you never leave me. This is not a formula for freedom and happiness. It is a blueprint for suffering. Genuine love, as envisioned by this path, is something else entirely. It is the radiant expression of the wholesome qualities we have already cultivated. It is, first and foremost, metta, or loving kindness. It is the simple, unconditional, and heartfelt wish for the other person to be happy and well. The focus shifts radically from, what can I get from this person, to how can I contribute to their happiness. It is a generous, outward-flowing energy, not a needy, inward-pulling one. It is also karuna, or compassion. It is the ability to be present with the other person's pain, their struggles, and their imperfections, without judgment and without needing to fix them. It is the willingness to hold a safe space for their suffering, to listen deeply, and to offer our presence as a balm. And most radically, true love is rooted in a profound wish for the other person's freedom. This is the ultimate test of non-attachment. It is the love that says, I want you to be free. Free to be who you truly are. Free to grow and change, even if that means you grow in a direction that is different from my own. It is a love that celebrates the other person's autonomy, rather than trying to constrain it. There is a beautiful metaphor that illustrates this distinction. Imagine you are walking in a forest, and you come across a small, beautiful bird. You are captivated by its song and its delicate beauty. Your first instinct, born of attachment, might be to catch it, to possess it. Out of fear that it might fly away, you close your hand tightly around it. Now the bird is yours. You own it. But in the very act of clenching your fist, you have crushed its fragile body. Its song is silenced. Its life is extinguished. You are left holding a lifeless object, not the vibrant, living creature that first captivated you. This is what attachment does. In its desperate attempt to secure a relationship, it stifles the very aliveness, spontaneity, and freedom that made the connection beautiful in the first place. Now, imagine a different approach. Instead of closing your fist, you simply hold out your open hand. The bird, feeling safe, might choose to land on your palm. It might rest there for a time, singing its song. You can appreciate its beauty and presence fully, without any sense of ownership. Then, it may choose to fly away. In that moment, you will feel a natural, clean pang of sadness at its departure, but it will be mixed with a sense of gratitude for the shared moment of connection. Or, the bird, feeling so safe and free in the space of your open hand, may choose to stay, to fly off and return, of its own free will. Its presence becomes a continuous gift, not a right. This is the nature of unattached love. It is the open hand, not the clenched fist. It is the offering of freedom as the highest expression of care. How then do we practice this in the messy reality of our lives? It begins with the first step of the metta practice. We must learn to tend to our own garden. The single most important act of love we can perform for our partners is to take responsibility for our own happiness. We stop making them the source. We commit to our own inner work, our own meditation, our own practice of befriending our demons. When we learn to fill our own inner void with the peace and contentment of our practice, we cease to be beggars in our relationships. We come to the relationship not as two half people trying to become whole, but as two whole people sharing their abundance. We also practice by bringing mindfulness to our expectations. We can watch our minds as they create idealized images of our partners and demand that they conform to them. In those moments, we can practice letting go of the idealized image and learning to love the real, imperfect, complex human being who is actually in front of us. We can practice gratitude, intentionally shifting our focus from what we think is lacking in the relationship to what is good and present. We can take a moment each day to appreciate one small thing our partner has said or done, one quality we admire in them. Gratitude is a powerful antidote to the fault-finding mind that is so often fueled by attachment. And we must learn to embrace anicca, impermanence, within our relationships. The person you fell in love with 10 years ago no longer exists. You no longer exist in the same way either. People change, grow, and evolve. To love without attachment is to love the entire journey of the other person, not just a static snapshot of them that we want to freeze in time. It is to create a space where both people feel safe to grow and change, even if it is sometimes in uncomfortable or unexpected ways. To love in this way is not cold, distant, or indifferent. It is the warmest, most courageous, and most alive way to love. Indifference is not the opposite of attachment. Love is. Indifference is a cold, closed heart. Unattached love is a wide-open heart, a heart so vast it can hold another person in their totality, with all their strengths and weaknesses, their joys and sorrows, without needing them to be any different than they are. It is the love that says, I am committed to your happiness, unconditionally, rather than the love of attachment, which says, I am committed to you as long as you are the source of my happiness. By learning to let go of the painful, fearful need to possess, we open ourselves up to the possibility of a connection that is truly joyful, profoundly intimate, and deeply liberating for both ourselves and the one we love. This radical reimagining of our most intimate bonds naturally compels us to re-examine our other life goals. If the purpose of a relationship is not to complete us, then perhaps the purpose of a career is not simply to enrich us. If our greatest aim is inner freedom, how does this change our entire conception of what it means to live a successful and meaningful life in the modern world? Having applied the lens of wisdom to our most intimate relationships, learning to replace the grip of attachment with the open hand of unconditional love, we now arrive at the final frontier of this inquiry. We turn this lens upon our life's ambition itself, upon the very definition of success that has driven us since we were young. From our earliest days, we are taught to play a certain game. The rules are simple and the scorecard is clear. Success is defined as the accumulation of external markers: more wealth, a more prestigious title, a larger home, greater influence, more recognition. We are taught that happiness is the prize waiting at the top of this ladder. We look at those who have amassed great fortunes or achieved widespread fame, and we are told this is what it means to have won. But the wisdom of the path compels us to ask a courageous question. Is this game truly winnable? And if we do win, what is the real prize? Does this relentless pursuit of more actually deliver the lasting peace and contentment that it promises? If we look closely, we can see that this entire model of success is built upon the unstable foundation of Tanha, the thirst that we have identified as the root cause of all dissatisfaction. It is a system designed to perpetuate desire, not to end it. It operates on the promise that happiness is always just around the corner. In the next promotion, the next salary bracket, the next purchase, we are placed on a hedonic treadmill, running faster and faster just to maintain the same level of satisfaction. We get the raise we longed for, and for a short while, we feel a thrill. But soon, our expectations adapt to this new level. It becomes our new normal, and our mind immediately begins to crave the next raise. We buy the dream car, and it brings us joy. But that joy fades as the new car smell disappears, and it becomes just a familiar object for getting from one place to another. This game has no finish line. Its very design is to keep us running, forever seeking and never fully arriving. Furthermore, we must honestly assess the hidden costs of this chase. In the relentless pursuit of external success, what do we sacrifice? We sacrifice our time, working long hours that leave us exhausted. We sacrifice our health, enduring chronic stress that damages our bodies. We sacrifice our relationships, too busy and distracted to offer our full presence to our partners and children. We may even sacrifice our integrity, making small ethical compromises along the way to get ahead. We trade the tangible reality of our present moment well-being for the imagined promise of a future happiness that, as we have seen, is a mirage. Many people who reach the pinnacle of this kind of success, who achieve everything our culture defines as winning, speak of a surprising and profound sense of emptiness. They climb the ladder to the top, only to realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. There is a powerful, perhaps apocryphal, story about Alexander the Great that illustrates the ultimate futility of this pursuit. Having conquered kingdoms and amassed more wealth and power than any man of his time, Alexander lay on his deathbed. He called his generals to him and told them he had 3 final wishes. First, he said, "My physicians alone must carry my coffin to the grave." Second, "The path from my palace to my tomb must be scattered with the gold, silver, and precious gems from my treasury." And third, he commanded, my hands must be left dangling outside the coffin for all to see. A puzzled general asked him to explain the meaning of these strange requests. Alexander replied, I want the most brilliant doctors to carry my coffin to show that even they are powerless in the face of death. I want the path to be covered with my riches so that everyone may see that not a single piece of the wealth I accumulated on earth can be taken with me. And I want my hands to be empty so that all may understand that we come into this world with nothing and we leave it with nothing. The greatest conqueror in the world learned on his deathbed that in the final accounting, material acquisition amounts to zero. If the world's definition of success is a game that cannot be truly won, the path of wisdom offers us a different game with a new scorecard. This new game is not about accumulating more, but about letting go of more. It is about cultivating our inner world, not just decorating our outer one. It proposes a radical new definition of a successful life. In this new paradigm, success is measured by the steady reduction of our own suffering and the suffering we cause others. A successful day is not one in which our bank account grew, but one in which we were a little less angry, a little less fearful, a little less consumed by selfish desire. A successful year is one in which we have become demonstrably more patient, more compassionate, and more present. The goal is not to have more, but to be more awake, more peaceful, more free. True wealth, from this perspective, is not counted in dollars, but in wholesome inner qualities. The real treasures are the qualities of the awakened heart. There is the immense wealth of Metta, of a heart filled with loving kindness, a richness that no amount of money can buy. There is the unshakable security of Tanha, the wisdom that sees reality clearly and is not fooled by the empty promises of the world. There is the profound peace of Samadhi, a concentrated and joyful mind that is a refuge in itself. And there is the supreme freedom of Nikkama, the joy of renunciation, the happiness of letting go. This leads to the cultivation of santuti, or contentment. Contentment is not a lazy resignation. It is the joyful and empowered state of being satisfied with what is enough. When we are truly content, we are truly rich, because we are no longer a slave to the endless demands of our own wanting mind. We have stepped off the treadmill. How then do we measure our progress on this new path? It is not measured by having extraordinary spiritual experiences, by seeing visions, or by achieving blissful states in meditation. While these things may happen, they are not the goal. The true and reliable measure of our progress is found in the simple, mundane moments of our daily lives. Has our practice made us a little kinder to our spouse? Are we a little more patient with our children? Are we less reactive when someone cuts us off in traffic? Do we find ourselves judging people less and listening more? Do we feel a greater sense of ease in our own skin? Do we smile more easily? This is the real fruit of the path. It is the gradual and steady transformation of our character, the slow purification of our heart, right in the midst of our ordinary life. The world encourages us to spend our lives building an impressive resume for our ego. The path of wisdom encourages us to spend our lives cultivating a beautiful resume for our heart. It is a fundamental reorientation of our life's purpose, a shift from a life of frantic accumulation to a life of mindful cultivation. It is the discovery that the security we seek cannot be found in a bank account, but only in a mind that is stable and serene. It is the realization that the love we crave cannot be guaranteed by another person, but can be generated limitlessly from within our own compassionate heart. It is the understanding that true success is not about what we have when we die, but about the quality of consciousness we have cultivated in each moment of our living. It is the discovery that the greatest treasure we can ever possess, the only one we can truly call our own, is a mind that is finally and beautifully free. This profound shift in our life's primary goal, from external seeking to internal cultivation, is the culmination of our journey through the landscape of wisdom. However, even on this wholesome path, a subtle and dangerous trap can emerge. The ego, the great trickster, can begin to take pride in its newfound spirituality. It can become attached to its wisdom, its peacefulness, its non-attachment. This can lead to a form of spiritual arrogance, a holier-than-thou attitude that is the most difficult obstacle of all. To protect ourselves from this final pitfall, we must cultivate one last, and perhaps most beautiful, quality: the open, humble, and ever curious spirit of the beginner's mind. We have now traveled the great arc of this path together. We have redefined our understanding of love, relationships, and the very meaning of a successful life, shifting our focus from the frantic acquisition of external things to the serene cultivation of our inner world. This is a profound and life-altering transformation. Yet, precisely at this moment of deep understanding and progress, we encounter the most subtle, the most cunning, and the most dangerous trap on the entire spiritual journey. It is the emergence of the spiritual ego. The ego, the sense of a separate self, is a great trickster. Having been starved of its usual diet of worldly accomplishment and material possessions, it can cleverly learn to feed on spirituality itself. It begins to take pride in its own wisdom. It starts to collect spiritual concepts and meditative experiences like trophies. It looks at others who are still caught in the grip of anger and craving and feels a subtle sense of superiority. It thinks, I am mindful. I am compassionate. I understand non-attachment. In that very moment, non-attachment becomes another possession of the ego. This is the ultimate dead end on the path, a gilded cage that is all the more difficult to escape because it feels so enlightened. The timeless antidote to this poison, the quality that keeps the path alive, fresh, humble, and authentic, is the cultivation of what Zen masters call shoshin, the beginner's mind. There is a classic Zen story that perfectly illustrates this principle. A highly educated and famous university professor who had spent years studying spiritual philosophy came to visit a wise old Zen master to learn about Zen. Upon being welcomed, the professor immediately began to speak, parading his vast intellectual knowledge. He spoke of the scriptures he had read, the complex philosophies he had mastered, and his own interpretations of the nature of reality. The Zen master listened patiently, saying nothing. After some time, the master said, "You must be thirsty after your long journey. Let us have some tea." He prepared the tea set, and as the professor continued to talk, the master began to pour tea into his guest's cup. He filled it to the brim, and then, without stopping, he kept pouring. Hot tea overflowed from the cup, spilling across the table and onto the floor. The professor, shocked out of his monologue, jumped up and cried, "Stop, the cup is full, no more will go in." The Zen master calmly set down the teapot, looked at the professor, and said, "Like this cup, you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup? This full cup is the expert mind. The expert mind is closed. It thinks it already knows. It listens to new information only to categorize it, to compare it to what it already holds, and to judge it. It is defensive, rigid, and no longer capable of true learning or wonder. The spiritual ego is the ultimate expert mind. It has all the answers. It has the map memorized and thinks it no longer needs to look at the territory. But the map is not the territory. The word water cannot quench your thirst. An intellectual understanding of Anatta is not the same as the liberating experience of selflessness. The expert mind clings to the concepts and, in doing so, misses the living reality to which they point. This leads to a form of spiritual materialism, where we collect spiritual insights and blissful meditation states as new ornaments for the ego. The practice becomes about achieving good meditations and avoiding bad ones, rather than simply being present with whatever arises. The freshness is lost. The path becomes a stale routine, a new kind of job with new kinds of goals, rather than a moment-to-moment process of discovery. The beginner's mind, by contrast, is the empty cup. It is a mind that is open, eager, spacious, and free from preconceptions. It is the mind that is willing to see everything as if for the first time. It is the mind of a small child looking at a flower, filled with a sense of pure wonder, not yet knowing the label flower or having any preconceived ideas about it. To cultivate beginner's mind is to approach our practice and our life with this same sense of fresh discovery, day after day. When you sit down on your cushion to meditate, can you do so as if you have never meditated before? Can you feel the sensation of this breath right now, without comparing it to the breath you took yesterday or the peaceful meditation you had last week? Can you meet your own mind with a sense of curiosity, wondering, who will show up today? What thoughts and feelings will visit? rather than with a fixed agenda of what your meditation should be like. The cultivation of beginner's mind is the cultivation of humility. It is the deep and honest recognition that no matter how much we have learned, we are just scratching the surface of life's mystery. It is the power and the freedom of being able to say, I don't know. The expert mind is afraid of not knowing, for it threatens its identity. The beginner's mind rejoices in not knowing, for it is the gateway to all learning. It means we can learn from anyone and any situation. We can learn from our children, from the person who serves us coffee, from a difficult colleague. Every person becomes our teacher, and every moment becomes an opportunity for practice, because we have let go of the arrogant belief that we already have it all figured out. This practice ultimately leads us to let go of even our most cherished spiritual concepts, including the very idea of enlightenment itself. As long as enlightenment is a goal we are striving for in the future, it is just another possession that the ego wants to acquire. It becomes another source of tension, striving, and subtle dissatisfaction. The beginner's mind is not concerned with some future attainment. It is radically focused on the process, not the prize. It is absorbed in the quality of this single step, this single breath, this single act of kindness. It understands that liberation is not a destination to be reached, but a quality of presence to be inhabited right now. The great raft of the teachings, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the concepts of Anicca, Dukkha, and Anatta are indispensably useful for crossing the river of confusion. But once we have reached the other shore, we do not strap the raft to our back and carry it around with us. We let it go. We let go of the labels, the concepts, even the identity of being a Buddhist or a spiritual person, and we simply live in the freedom that the practice has revealed. The hallmark of true wisdom is not a mind full of knowledge, but a heart full of humility. It is not the certainty of the expert, but the open, curious, and gentle spirit of the perpetual beginner. The beginner's mind is the secret to keeping our practice alive, vibrant, and authentic over the long course of a lifetime. It is the quality that protects us from the most subtle trap of all the belief that we have arrived. It is the constant remembering that each day is a new day, each breath is a new breath, and each moment is a fresh opportunity to open our eyes and see the world and ourselves anew. It is the quiet joy of being an empty cup, always spacious, always ready to receive the boundless gifts of the present moment. And so, our long and detailed journey through the vast landscape of this ancient wisdom now draws to a close. We have walked a winding path together from the initial diagnosis of our modern condition, through the profound and life-altering truths of existence, to the practical tools for training the mind and the guidelines for integrating this wisdom into our daily lives. We have come full circle, beginning with the noise of the anxious mind, and ending with the call to embrace the quiet, open space of the beginner's mind. Now, let us take a moment, as if standing on a high summit, to look back at the path we have traveled, to gather the essential lessons we have learned, and to fortify ourselves with hope and empowerment for the lifelong journey that lies ahead. We began our journey together in a quiet room, listening to the deafening roar of a mind at war with itself. We felt the undertow of modern anxiety, the exhaustion of running on a treadmill of wanting, the deep ache of a spiritual homelessness. From that place of shared unease, we embarked on an exploration, following a map left for us by the great physician. We traced the path from the initial diagnosis of our suffering, dukkha, to the identification of its true cause, the relentless, thirsty grasping of Tanha. We dared to look at the very nature of the self and found not a solid, fixed entity, but a flowing, selfless, and interconnected process, the liberating truth of Anatta. We learned of the gentle, impersonal law of karma, realizing that the power to shape our future lies in the intention we cultivate in this very moment. With this profound understanding as our foundation, we began to gather our tools. We learned to walk the noble Eightfold Path, embracing the ethical conduct of sila that calms our conscience, and undertaking the deep mental training of samadhi that steadies our mind. Through the practice of mindfulness, we discovered the anchor of the breath and the sacredness of the present moment. Through meditation, we learned to tame the wild horse of the mind and to befriend our deepest fears. We brought this practice into our livelihood, our speech, and our most intimate relationships, learning to redefine success not as what we can accumulate, but as the peace and wisdom we can cultivate. We have journeyed from a state of being a prisoner of our mind to becoming its compassionate caretaker, and we have concluded with the essential wisdom of remaining always a humble beginner. And so, we arrive at the simple, resonant truth that has been the quiet heartbeat of our entire journey. Peace is not found by adding more to our lives, but by gently letting go. It is not an external destination we must travel to, but an internal state we can learn to access. It is the peace that arises when we finally stop struggling against the natural flow of life. Letting go of the mind, as the ancient wisdom says, peace will arise. This does not mean becoming thoughtless or empty. It means letting go of our attachment to our thoughts. It is the ability to watch the clouds of worry, planning, and judgment drift through the vast, open sky of our awareness without being swept away by them. Peace is not the absence of waves on the surface of the ocean. It is the discovery of the deep, silent stillness that lies eternally beneath them. This path, this journey, may seem vast, but it begins with a single, simple step. You do not need to retreat to a mountain monastery or change your entire life overnight. Your laboratory is your life, just as it is. Your cushion is your office chair, your seat on the bus, the ground beneath your feet. Your tools are your own breath and your own awareness. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with the intention to take one mindful step. The path to inner peace begins with the choice to be fully present with a single, conscious breath. The gate is always open. The present moment is always here. And the profound peace you have been seeking is not a distant prize to be won, but a homecoming to the quiet, radiant sanctuary of your own awakened heart. Simply begin,